My wife, I think, had eaten, and when I came home, evidently she didn't have what I wanted to eat, and I decided I wanted to broil chicken, and so I proceeded to get a chicken, cut up a chicken, and Denise came up there where I was, and she jumped up on the kitchen counter, and her mother came in the kitchen and looked at her, and Denise looked at me, and I didn't tell her to get off the counter, and if Daddy didn't tell me to move, bye to you.
And I just thought that sitting on the counter in the kitchen where you gonna put food, that's a no-no.
And so I let her sit up there, and I finished cutting up the chicken, cleaned it, and then seasoned it, and proceeded to broil it. Did broil it. And then we ate the chicken, had a good time. To me, and I've often referred to it with my wife in that tone, it was like the Last Supper, as I would imagine it would have been with Christ and his disciples, and I'm serious about this.
Context of White Supremacy. Justice, Gus T Renegade in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information on the system of white supremacy. Today's date, Monday, June 24th, 2013, so I have been told. The audio at the beginning, a segment from Spike Lee's documentary film, Four Little Girls. Great film. I would highly encourage folks to watch it. This is the 50-year anniversary of the March on Washington coming up in a few months. As I've said a couple times before, it is also the 50-year anniversary of the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church. The four victims, Addie Mae Collins, Cynthia Wesley, Carol Robertson, and Denise McNair. You heard Denise McNair, her mother and father, speaking at the beginning of the broadcast. This book we're going to talk about today also talks about fathers also go through a lot in being separated from their daughters, lots of pain all the way around as a result of racism, white supremacy. Our guest for today's broadcast was recommended about a year ago, a little more than a year ago, Esther Stanford Kose, black female. She hosts Voice of Africa Radio in the UK. She's been on our program many times. I forgot how many times at this point, but the very first time she was on, she recommended two guests. We've been able to have both of them on. The first guest was Shafia Monroe with the International Center for Traditional Childbearing. Great information. It was fantastic to get her on the broadcast. The other person that she recommended is joining us today. We were trying to actually have her on the program earlier, but she was doing outstanding work. She had a good friend who had, unfortunately, had a house fire, and she had to pitch in to help out, which caused us to reschedule, but thankfully we were able to remember and get her on the broadcast. She is an award-winning author and journalist. Her articles and essays have appeared in such publications as the Washington Post, the Washington Times, Essence Magazine, and the Washingtonian magazine. She has published several books, including Bridges, Reuniting Daughters and Daddies, as well as The Corner is No Place for Hiding, which is a collection of original poetry. The book we're going to discuss today, her 2000 bestseller, Whatever Happened to Daddy's Little Girl? The Impact of Fatherlessness on Black Women. Real pleasure to have her on the program. Joining us live, our guest, Miss Jonetta Rose Barras. Let's see, Miss Barras, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We really appreciate having you on the program. Even Miss Stanford Kose said she wanted to check out the broadcast once we have you on, so she'll be listening in too. For folks, this might be their first time hearing from you. Any information you would like to share with listeners? Anything you think they should know about you?
Well, I never talk about myself much with respect to the book. Whatever Happened to Daddy's Little Girl? It's my story and the story of a collection of women. When I first wrote the book, I did not realize how many women were affected by this issue until I started traveling around and talking with people, and I realized that there is like a legion of women in America who have grown up without their biological fathers and who are suffering some of the symptoms that I write about in the book. The fatherless woman syndrome is what I call it. And so I'm eager to chat about that and to, kind of answer questions that you might have with regards to that.
Yes, ma'am. We're going to try to maximize, be as efficient as we can. We have Miss Jonetta Rose Barras. We have her for an hour, so do not be lazy. If you have a question, something you want to get in, make sure you get your hand up before we get to the end of the hour, and I'll get a reminder in about that before we get too close. This publication, as you said, you started off, or actually you didn't say, but it started off, you wrote an essay talking about some of these issues about not having that father void, and then you found out that there were a lot of females who were suffering with a lot of the same pain, same issues, and that there was a real void of resources and material talking or targeting. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, and there were. And what started me on this was I was actually reporting around the fatherhood movement, which, as you know, began in the early 1990s. And the focus was on fathers and sons. And every time I went to an event, I kept asking myself, if fathers are so valuable to sons, why aren't they valuable to daughters? Why isn't anyone talking about the value of fathers to their daughters as their daughters are growing up, and even as their daughters are adult women? And that's what prompted me. And oddly, as I was asking myself this question, I learned that my own biological father was not the man I thought it was, but it was someone else. And so that's how I got into the whole issue of, when I discovered who my father was, I wrote an essay for a local paper in Washington, D.C. called the Washington City Paper, and that, kind of evolved into a larger project, which became the book.
I want to read a little bit from the book and then get you to comment and kind of lay out some of the details around fatherless woman syndrome. And then if you can comment on the portion that I read from the book, that would be great too. This is from page 17, the chapter Strange Fruit. You write, the revelation that a man different from the one my sisters and brother called father had impregnated my mother with me, branded me anew as the family's black sheep. Like Vietnam veterans whose flashbacks are so real that they are transported once again to the Southeast Asian jungle, sweating from the oppressive heat, jumping at the deafening sound of gunfire, and fearful that life may end within seconds, I was mangled by the implicit resurrection of the tale I had heard throughout my childhood, a taunt whispered by my sisters and brother in our bedroom, drawing blood from my soul, crippling me beyond anyone's understanding. Even today, it bruises me and it anchors me in anguish. The story went like this. My mother has just given birth to me. The nurses at Charity Hospital in New Orleans, who had tended to her when my brother and sister were born, are the same ones at her side when I arrive. Seeing me all cleaned up in the nursery, they came to warn her that she cannot take me home. They say her husband Bill will know I am not his. There are distinct differences between my features and those of my older sister and brother. They have dark curly hair with which some black people call good hair. Their Creole skin evidences the mix of white, Spanish, French, and Indian blood that runs through our family. I, on the other hand, flaunt darker skin, nappy hair, and a broad nose. Years later, after hearing far too many times how different I was, I looked into the mirror and saw only what those nurses saw. I was perplexed by the deviation and believed myself an awful mistake. I wanted to beat myself unmercifully for my ugliness. I tried lightening my skin with bleaching creams. Even before that, my mother used a hot comb in my hair, hoping to straighten out the kinks, only to have them return with the slightest moisture. There wasn't any help for my nose. As a young girl, my mother told me not to smash it, which is exactly what I did when it itched. There were times, however, when I went around squeezing and pinching my nose as if I were a victim of a malodorous wind. Sometimes I fantasized about rhinoplasty. Frequently and privately, I searched the faces of relatives looking for commonality, a mole, a wrinkle, an eyebrow that said, "You belong." I found only loose threads, nothing whole and complete that I could embrace with security, nothing to which I could cling as Linus does to his blanket. Whatever happened to Daddy's little girl? Your thoughts?
Wow, and when I hear you read it, it's incredible that I actually survived that psychologically. But that is actually the truth. And interestingly, my mother and Bill were divorced, and so when Bill would come to visit my brother and sister, he never wanted to be with me, and that exacerbated my sense of loneliness and not belonging. And it wasn't until I was in my 30s that I met my biological father, and it all came together. But the part you didn't read was how I actually learned that I was actually the product of an affair that my mother had. And she just called me up one day and said, "Do you want to meet your father?" And I was thinking she was talking about Bill. And I said, "Well, Bill never liked me, and why would I want to see Bill, and are you out of your mind?" And no, she said, no, I mean your real father. And I was flabbergasted. Not only was there another man who was my real father, as she said, but this man had been trying to reconnect with me for decades. And she had deliberately kept him out of my life. In fact, at one point, he lived in Baltimore, and I lived in Washington, D.C., just a few minutes, really, away from each other. I met him 2 years before he actually died. And when I met him, it was as if I were looking at myself in the mirror. I mean, we looked so much alike, and it brought a certain comfort to me that there was someone to whom someone who had loved me all these years, just the way I was, and had been desperately trying to reconnect with me, but also someone whose features I could reflect on and see that I was not this ugly duckling, but rather I was someone else's child.
Have you, just in the time that you've been doing your research, have you noted some of the key aspects of what you shared in the passage and what you just touched on with regards to the self-esteem issues and sometimes there being some sabotage with regards to keeping a father away? Are those consistent components of the fatherless woman syndrome?
I will tell you, when I first wrote the essay, that when the essay was first published, the first response I got was not from a woman, but from a man who was married to a woman who had grown up without her father. And he was talking about how he really loved this woman, and there were things he wanted to do for her, but she would not let him do things. And he was so frustrated and flabbergasted until he read the essay, and then it all came together for him. And so what I did in writing the book, more than the essay, in writing the book, I actually tried to look at my own characteristics, because I sabotaged many relationships. I was married twice. I had children by 3 different men. I tell people all the time, a man doesn't leave me, I leave him, because and that is not to say, that is to say mainly, I don't, there's a level of distrust and or mistrust in relationships. And so the fatherless woman, the fatherless daughter syndrome that I outline in the book, there are 5 factors. The factor, which you kind of alluded to regarding self-esteem, but it's much more insidious than just a low self-esteem. It is actually a fundamental belief that you are unlovable and unworthy of love. And then the triple fear factor, the fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear of commitment. That fear, which is really kind of a lack of trust in relationships, it's evident that way. So you don't get into a relationship because you think you're going to be rejected. You think you're going to be abandoned. You're afraid to make a commitment to the person because you think the person is eventually going to leave you the way your father left you. And even if you didn't know your father left you, you didn't know him, you know he's not there. You know you should have a father. And so there must have been something wrong with you because this father of yours left. The sexual healing factor is when fatherless girls use sex not because they necessarily enjoy sex, but they use it more as a kind of a way of assuaging the pain that you have. And so it's mainly because you want to be comforted. You want someone to hold you. You know, there's this pretense of love. And it's okay if it's a pretense because, you know, it's just for a moment. But that's what sex is. And so the fatherless girl or fatherless woman can appear to be promiscuous, but it's not about sex. It's about warmth and the attempt to fill the hole in the heart where there is supposed to be a father's love. The over factor, and I always tell this, especially with African American women, we are so busy trying to show we are strong black women that we're leaping tall buildings and damn near killing ourselves. And so you overcompensate. You're trying to basically say to the absent father, look what you missed. I'm almost perfect. In fact, I am perfect. When I was in elementary school, I remember there were times when I would get only a satisfactory grade for something. And I would literally cry in my classroom because I was thinking, who would love me? I'm not really that smart. I need to make an A. I need to make an A all the time, every time. And that is part of the expression of the over factor. And then there's the RAD factor, the rage, anger, and depression factor. First, you're angry, you're enraged because something was stolen from you, something was taken from you. And when that rage that you project outward doesn't bring you the kind of comfort you're looking for, then there is depression that sets in. Many of the women that I interviewed as I was working on the book actually thought of committing suicide. I myself, at one point, considered suicide. And so those are the factors that generally a girl or a woman growing up with her father experiences. Maybe not all of them, but certainly many of them. And even a woman who has grown up, or a girl who's growing up in a home where the father is there, but he's not emotionally available, may very well express some of these factors as well.
Context of White Supremacy. Again, our guest, Jonetta Rose Barras. Again, the book has so much just honest, candid information. It's really a treasure to read. We have talked about depression before on the program and the havoc that plays on the mental health of Black people. One of the topics that has come up, you say in the book, you say it several times, if you are feeling depressed, if you are feeling suicidal, reach out, call someone, seek professional help. Don't delay. You can, at minimum, you can call a local hospital and they can direct you to the correct resources or organization to get help. Some of our listeners have said, we're in a system of racism, white supremacy. I am hesitant to go seek therapy from a white person about my problems, particularly if it might be related to racism and talking about my absent father to a white person. What would your response be to that?
Well, let me just tell you that the whole issue of fatherlessness has no color and no class. In America, it's like the number of women who get divorced every year is increasing, not decreasing. And so you have many families where the father is not in the home or is not actively participating in their daughter's life or their children's lives. And so it's not, while I focus on, who I am and the women that I interviewed are all African American, I had the occasion to do a show once when Iyanla Vanzant was on, I think it was on one of the broadcast channels, and I was sitting next to a white woman who was actually telling her story about growing up without her father and the impact that it had on her. And I looked at her because I was surprised that our stories were quite similar, to the point that she was the child of an affair that her mother had. So I want to caution people, and I met Native American women in my travel and Asian women in my travel who also had some of the same factors that we talk about. Now, what I say to women about depression in terms of reaching out to one of your own or from your own community, because there's more of a level of comfort in talking about your depression, and there's that cultural context that may not be able to be provided by a white therapist or a white psychologist, psychiatrist. Then I think that there are there is a whole association of Black psychologists. You just, find that association and they can direct you to someone in your community who's a therapist or who has the other credentials of a psychologist, psychiatrist. But it is important. When I was feeling this feeling of wanting to do myself harm, I reached out to a friend of mine who was a psychologist, and he referred me to a woman actually. And I didn't stay with the therapy, but I wrote the book, and that was sort of cathartic for me. It helped me to heal. It took me another book to fully heal, but it certainly began, it put me on a path to healing.
So two quick ones then. So even if it's a white therapist and you have some hesitation, if you are a Black person and you're having issues around fatherlessness, you can benefit from even a white counselor. You think it's possible you can get some constructive gains from that?
I think you can certainly get something to arrest the moment, to calm you from the moment. If you feel you need long-term therapy, and sometimes that's the case, then, and you want another, often they know others, and they don't feel personally offended when you say, look, I'd like to, do you know an African-American psychologist or therapist that I could go to? And generally they'll know somebody that they can refer you to. In my book, Bridges, Bridges, Reuniting Daughters and Daddies, in the back I have a couple of referrals for people who want to see a therapist or try to actually work through issues, whatever those issues are. There are some mental health specialists that I I refer, and organizations that I refer people to.
Outstanding. I also encourage folks, you can get other information for Ms. Barras, as well as her books and what have you. You can visit her website, which is her name, Jonetta Rose Barras.com. Should be in the description for the program. On page 238, I thought this was really important. I was hoping you could share a little bit of detail on this. You wrote, how do you learn to love yourself? That has been one of the hardest struggles for me. The girl who heard she was the black sheep with nappy hair and a wide nose. The girl who later added to her physical misfortunes by having a wide ass and spaghetti-thin legs in a society that fawns over less voluptuous hips and more ample calves. I have changed my locus from external to internal. I have set my own goals, my own standards, and my own ethics, which strangely enough reflect those of the broader society and not those marketed by television, magazines, and the general media and entertainment industries. Unlike in the past, I have refused to alter myself for others. Alterations are mine to declare and mine to make. I have sought and found friends, male and female, who know the value of a book is more than its cover. They have helped me nurture my femininity and other parts of me that fatherlessness almost completely destroyed, and when life's events sometimes prove overwhelming, thrusting me back into bad patterns of behavior, I have adopted a daily spiritual cleansing ritual that keeps the pollutions of the world at a minimum. I thought that was quite significant. Could you share some tips maybe on what does your daily spiritual cleansing ritual consist of?
I will, but I want to say something about the internal locus piece, because I think that's important. When people talk, I mean, I've had women say, well, I had a great mother. And, I had a great mother, too. And actually, I had a fabulous grandfather. But a father is just that, a father. And a mother can never be a father. And a grandfather is a grandfather, okay? And so there are things that grandfathers can do depending on their age and things that they can't do. One of the things that I learned in my research is, what does a father bring to a girl? And one of the things that a father helps a girl with is he kind of chauffeurs her in the world. He teaches her how to navigate through the world, how to interact with men, how to interact even with other women. And he allows her to have more confidence in her ability. And he teaches her how to feel confident in the decisions that she makes, so that the internal locus that I talk about is internally being in control of yourself. Your father teaches you that. I remember when my daughter first learned to ride a bike, her father took her into this into the traffic. I was having a fit. And, but it's that kind of being able to adventure out in the world. And as a result of adventuring out into the world, you begin to have more confidence in your skill, in yourself, and who you are. And also, with regard to the femininity, it is lovely. I say, isn't it lovely when you wake up in the morning and there's your father and your hair is uncombed, your breath stinks, you just look all ragged. And your father leans over, picks you up, and says, I love you. That, to me, is magic, because it helps you to understand that who you are, that a sense of unconditional love. He gives it to you, and you, in turn, give it to yourself. And so that is, I think, so important to understand what a father brings to us. When you can stand up and your father can say he loves you just the way you are, there's an element of being comfortable with being the woman you are, whether it's wide ass and thin legs like me or somebody else. So what I do in the mornings is that I've learned to kind of affirm myself in meditation, but also in kind of an invocation of my own personal female magic that I realize is mine and mine alone. There's no other woman who has my particular magic. She may have her magic. And you learn how to use that to embolden yourself when you go in the world, empower yourself when you go in the world, and also to underscore that you are able to compete and to succeed. And I think that, I learned that when I met my father for the first time, one of the things he told me was he loved me. And that was magic to hear that from your father. But, to say that he had been looking for me all those years. So it wasn't as if he abandoned me. It was a barrier that had been placed between us. And a lot of times I think women, young girls and women don't realize their fathers, it's not that their fathers don't love them. There are all these different barriers sometimes that prevent them from stepping into their child's life, their daughter's life. It might be the mother, it might be child support and the fact that he doesn't have enough money to really pay child support. It could be all kinds of things. And so I think the main thing is to recognize that, but also to recognize, that despite this absence, there is a way that you can heal and begin to kind of embrace your own personal magic and personal power. And one thing that what helped me, I had great male friends who both served as surrogates for me, for my father in his absence, teaching me how to have friendships, platonic friendships with men, but also how to have romantic friendships, and how not to lose myself in search of my father.
Context of White Supremacy. I have one more question, and I want to see if Justice has any questions. Listeners out there, if you have questions, press *6 if you would like to ask Miss Jonetta Rose Barras anything about the book or what we have been discussing. This is on page 226, and I thought this was just a great segment and would give you an opportunity to explain the concept of seeing with adult eyes. This is on 226. You're writing about talking with your daughter about her own fatherlessness. You write, once upon a time, you're talking to your daughter, there was a man who believed his daughter to be as precious, if not more precious, than the air he breathed, as precious as the sun and the rain. This man took his daughter almost everywhere he went, introducing her to the world so that when he could not be at her side, she would know and understand its language. He spent his weekends riding a bike with her, teaching her the geography of the city in which they lived, helping her to understand in simple terms its demographics, and informing her that contrary to what people may say, because her skin is black, she is not a minority, she is a majority not only in her hometown, but throughout the world. People of color are the mainstream, he often told her. He took her on picnics, sitting side by side. They dined on sandwiches and they drank juice he had made with his juicer. He wanted to show her the treatment she should expect from boys who came knocking at her door, confessing love and affection, but unwilling to do even the smallest things for her pleasure. This man also introduced his daughter to organizations in which he was a member, non-verbally imparting the standards and values to which he hoped she would adhere. The kind of fatherly values Michael Gregory Stevens wanted to bequeath to his daughter. This man, I tell her, was her father. That evening, as the television droned, I reached for the only balm I believed could heal my daughter, the truth. With few embellishments, I told her the story of Africa and Tommy as I knew it. As in the children's song game, I said, "Rise, daughter, rise, and wipe your weeping eyes." If she looked around, I told her she would see love, and while she couldn't have her father in the home with her, she could still have him. Africa asked me, as Sandra had asked her mother that day, why it had taken me so long to explain the story behind her mother and father's separation. Maybe I had finally stopped licking my own wounds long enough to notice that my daughter was hemorrhaging. Maybe, as Audrey Chapman said, I had grown weary of seeing and experiencing the habitual pain. Today there is a calm between my daughter and her father. Weeks after our talk, Tommy arrived from New York to celebrate Kwanzaa in the city. He brought along his oldest son, who adores his half-sister and who expresses a fondness for me. The trio went to candle-lighting ceremonies, had dinner together, and generally spent a few days enjoying one another's company. In the spring, Africa went to visit her father in New York. They returned on the train together. I met them at Union Station, ostensibly to take her luggage home while the two of them ventured off. Tommy smiled. "You wanted a daughter," he said as I reached for her suitcase. Indeed, I did. I will stop there. If you can explain how all of this relates to seeing with adult eyes.
And the thing is that one of the reasons I wrote the book is because I wanted women to be careful, to understand the potential danger of having a child without it being a deliberate action, without thinking about the relationship they had with the man. And in my case, when I decided I wanted to have a child, and I actually wanted a daughter, I was still, I had no idea how messed up I was, emotionally. I really didn't. And so I had this child, and I had a husband, and I eventually left my husband, and I didn't think about the impact that leaving him, he had really done nothing. I was just, in this kind of fatherless daughter syndrome thing that I was in, and he was a very good father, and so, but I needed to go. Because I was afraid to be in a committed relationship like that. And so I had no idea what I was doing to my daughter until years later. And because she had a strong relationship with her father. And I just snatched her out of that without any regard for the pain that I was causing her. Because I was into my own pain and my own drama and craziness for not having my father around. I had no concept of the kind of cycle of sadness and pain that I was causing. And so after I had my eyes, when I finally awakened to what was going on in my life, then I could see it in hers. And it was my attempt to kind of, put her on a track, because she had a real great relationship with her father. It wasn't as if he left her. I left him and took her with me. And so I was trying to rebuild their relationship, and actually now it has been rebuilt. And so she gets the benefit of that relationship. I'm sure it would have been much better if she had it, through her teen years, because there was that suffering of the syndrome that I saw for many years after I divorced, her father and I divorced. But now things are much better, and she has healed, or she is healing from that, from that trauma. And one of the things I learned was that, people always say children get over it. They'll get over it. And when I was doing my research, a psychologist said to me she said, the only reason we think children get over it is because children don't have the language, the organizing tool to kind of convey to adults the pain that they're going through. And so they sit quietly and suffer. And then we learn about it when they start hitting 13 and 14 and they start acting out. And even when they start acting out, we're not sure why they're acting out, but they're acting out because they are enraged about what has happened to them. And now they have, even if they don't have the language, they actually can express it, through their behaviors. So I think what I was trying to convey there is that we have to be very, very careful about the damage we are doing to our children. There is the proverb that says, it takes a village to raise a child. But in America, the village itself is sick. And so we have to be very careful about who in the village we ask to help heal us and how we exacerbate the village's pain and agony and depression and sickness.
Ashe. Justice, if you have some questions for Miss Jonetta Rose Barras, let's see here. Your line should be open for the folks who were having problems listening on the Black Talk Radio Network. It should be corrected. You should be able to listen online. If you want to listen on the phone, that's fine too, but you should be able to listen at Black Talk Radio Network now. Justice, your line should be open. Please proceed.
Can I be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Greetings, Miss Jonetta and Gus and the listeners. I was just curious of why is literature your favorite subject?
Oh, because when I was a young child and I was the black sheep, or I felt myself the black sheep, I actually retreated into books. And that retreat gave me a world in which I was, comfortable. Books and writing. I wrote stories. I wrote poems. And so that is why it's my favorite. It actually now is the thing that I feel, it's the talent that I think, it's my prime talent. So I guess you could say that everything about being fatherless or not having my father in my home wasn't all bad, because I became a kind of an excellent reader and writer as a result of that.
Earlier, I heard you talk about how writing helped you. Can you please share specifically how writing helped you?
I think that particularly writing this book helped me because it forced me, I will just tell you a story just to digress for a minute. There was, when the book came out, the publisher asked the PR agent if she would be willing to find someone to write a review of the book. And the woman they got to write the review of the book came back and said she couldn't write the review of the book, and said the reason she couldn't write the review of the book was because she was crying on every page. She was crying because it was her story that I was telling. And many women would tell me that at least the first 13 pages they would cry. And I would say to them, well, that's because I was crying when I was writing it, because I had finally understood everything that had happened in my life, and I could articulate it, and I felt that I was cleansing. The book was a cleansing for me. It was, it was finally me saying, I hurt, I was in pain, I was in agony, I was lonely, I was desperate, I was depressed, I was all of these things, and I finally got a chance to get that out. But not only was I getting it out for myself, I was getting it out for other women who had not had the opportunity or felt the freedom to say, I needed my father and I wanted my father. Because to say that at a time when I was growing up, in that whole feminist movement thing, where men somehow became they became like the demons and the ogres of society, and that they were not needed. And so women felt, I think, many women felt, to say that you needed a man was a weakness. And to say that you needed a father when you had your mother was an insult to your father, an insult to your mother, which obviously I disagree with. You can love your mother the way I love my mother. I thought my mother was just, a goddess. But I also needed my father as that balance in my life. And so that was what the book provided me, an opportunity to kind of cleanse myself and at the same time to have the freedom to say, I wanted my father. And there's nothing wrong with the fact that I wanted him. And in fact, there is so much he could have added to my life when I was growing up that I didn't get to experience. And it's okay for me to have wanted him and to have needed him and to recognize the special gift that he would have brought to my life.
What do you think is the cause of the absentness of black fathers?
In the book, I kind of related to multiple things. Obviously, everybody wants to go back to slavery. But if you look back at slavery, a lot of families were intact. A lot of slave fathers and mothers worked very hard to keep their children with them. There was that factor of, separating the father and the mother and the children and all of that. So that was part of it. And then I talk, of course, about the welfare system itself that encouraged, especially in the African American community, encouraged men to leave their families in order for their families to get the help that they needed. Low-income, working-class families that maybe were having a struggling. The only way the woman could get help or the family could get help is for the father to leave or to at least pretend he's not there. And so that kind of that exacerbated the problem. And then, as I just mentioned, the feminist movement, which, of course, even now, there's all these books being written, The End of Men. I don't know if you saw a survey recently where they talked about how many women are now the breadwinners in their families. The 5 million white women are the breadwinners in their family, and 8 million African American women are the breadwinners in their family. And instead of discussing, okay, what's happening here, everybody started talking about the end of men. And so it's not the end of men. How could it be the end of men? And so I think part of that is kind of an outgrowth from the feminist movement that made men, that kind of neutered or made men as eunuchs. And as a result, in some instances, they felt that they were not valued or that they offered no value in their homes with their children and with their daughters especially. And then the last thing that I would say is that there was this whole thing about sexual abuse and child sexual abuse and how men began to pull away so that the affection that that they should show to their daughters, they weren't showing to their daughters, because to show affection in certain ways is to suggest improper relations with your child, with your daughter. So there, I think all of those things exacerbated and made men feel that they were not needed and were not valued.
Would you say white people are most responsible for absent black fathers?
No, I wouldn't say that. I would say that there are, because I think that there are white people who are also suffering the way I suffered. There are white girls and women who I met who would just stand in front of me and cry. But I do think that there are certain public policies that have, and because you're looking at until the 60s or 70s, most of those public policies were advanced by whites who had no true understanding of their potential impact in our communities. And so that, I think, is most important. And even now, this whole push now on child support, and, it's like swinging the pendulum too far one way and then swinging it too far the opposite way. And so now you have this whole movement where, they were sending men to jail in some states when you don't, because you weren't paying child support, where the value of a father isn't just a dollar bill. The value of the father is his actual presence there and imparting to his daughter and to his son his knowledge and his expertise as a father. There are things that fathers do and that mothers don't do. There's information that fathers impart to their children that mothers don't impart. Mothers impart a different set of skills, talents, and information to their children. And so I think that rather than just kind of say, okay, white people did it, white people did it in terms of the public policies that were advanced in the early 20th century. Now I think that there are black people and white people doing it who have no sense of the long-term effect of father absence.
How do you think black people who have absent fathers should respond with their actions and or words?
What I would like to do, one of the things, the reason I wrote this book is because I would like there to be an awakening and an awareness of the negative consequences, but also an awareness of the positive energy and information that a father brings to his daughter's life, and that it has instead of not needing your father when you get to be an adult woman, in fact, you need your father even more as you begin to interact in the world. And begin to interact in relationships with men, because your father can help you to translate that relationship far better than your mother can, or far better than you can in some instances. And so I think that African Americans, I would like for us to begin to understand the importance, and especially for African American women, to begin to help in inviting men to return to the family, and inviting them to have strong relations with their daughters, especially. Just because a mother and a father can't get along together, doesn't mean that father can't have a whole, healthy, and important, significant relationship with his daughter, and the mother should try to invite that, unless the father is a domestic violence abuser, or someone who is been involved with domestic violence, is still using drugs, is alcoholic and still an alcoholic, not a recovering alcoholic. Unless the father is into serious crime, then I think the father should be invited to share what he has to offer, even if he doesn't have money to offer. he's still valuable to that daughter. And I can tell you, there have been so many daughters who've cried for their fathers. And they're not crying for their father's money. They're crying for their father's love. They're crying for their father's time and attention. They're crying for the guidance that their father can give them. That's what they're crying for.
Does your work help to replace a system of white supremacy with a system of justice? If so, how?
I think my work as a journalist helps me to help other people. It helps me to empower others to make decisions in their lives and in their communities. The book was an attempt for me to empower women to go get your father. Okay? And in my work as a journalist, as a columnist, as an essayist, my effort is to help people understand that they're in charge of their government, that it is really a government of the people, by the people, for the people. But only if the people recognize that and become involved and actually do the work that they're supposed to do to make it work for them.
Can I be heard? Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay. I read your biography on your website, and it seems like you enjoy the work that you do. Do you still want to continue the work that you do?
Absolutely. I want to continue the work that I do until the day that I die. I used to be a professional community organizer, trained in the Fatherlessness style of organizing like the president. And the work that I do is an extension of that, of community organizing. I am a person who believes in fairness and in justice for all, regardless of race, color, creed, class. And my writings and the work that I attempt to do is to bring that justice, or to help people get that justice for themselves and for their community. I think all of us have a mission in life. And once you find that mission, two things happen. You are able to make a huge contribution to the wellness of the world, and you are able to find peace and happiness in life. And for me, I have found my mission, which is writing. And I'm happy with that.
Have you thought about writing a book for children? If so, what do you think it will be about?
Actually, I have some children's stories that I've written. I wrote a children's play that was published, that was actually staged at the Kennedy Center back in the, I guess it was the late 80s, early 90s, and I am kind of going back to that play to see if I could do it in a book form. And it was actually about how the various people of color came to form the earth, or their particular parts of the world, and how we have so much in common, people of color. People from Asia, people from South America, Latinos, and obviously people of African descent. And so my intent was in writing that was to kind of help us to celebrate our the similarities rather than talk about the differences.
Thank you for answering my questions, and hopefully we can have you back on the program.
Oh, I would love to come back some other time to talk about these and other things. Thank you very much. I enjoyed it very, very much.
It was grand. Thank you for visiting on the program. We will definitely be in touch about having you back on the broadcast, and we'll encourage folks to pick up a copy of your book. On the way out, do you have time? Can I get this? Get your response to this as you exit? This was
okay.
On page 53. Given everything that's been happening with the gay rights movement, you wrote, and this was published in 2000, you wrote, experts have found routinely that there are important departures between women and men and their child rearing. Fathers help to individuate their children. They often permit unrestrained exploration, aiding in the development of a child's strong and confident emotional self. Even before a child reaches the toddler stage, a father teaches standards and principles and is often responsible for reinforcing sex-appropriate behavior for his children. And it seems like that has shifted radically given all the movements around. I just wanted to get your thoughts on that before you go.
Yeah, and I always get myself in trouble. But I say to people, okay, I can't change your sexual orientation, but what I can say to you is that there is a reason you have a father and a son, a father and a mother, a woman and a man in a home, because there is cross educating that goes on, so that the mother is teaching the son about information that the son needs in interacting with other women in the world, okay? And the father is teaching the daughter information that she needs. And so that cross kind of education is very important. So if you're a lesbian or if you're a homosexual male and you've got children, then it's going to be your responsibility to make sure that those kids get that other set of information that you can't share to them. So you are obligated to go out and find a surrogate who will serve, a surrogate father for your daughter or a surrogate mother for your son, so that information is shared. Because I don't care, I just think that there's certain innate information that is going to be shared that you cannot get in these kind of same-sex families that one gets in heterosexual families. It doesn't mean that you can't get it, but you have to seek the surrogate to provide that for your child. And I think many gay families do that, even though they don't realize why they're doing it or that they're doing it. They do it. At least the gay families that I have known. But I do definitely say, if you're gay, if you're straight, if you're gay, if you're heterosexual, it doesn't matter. One thing you have to do is think about the child and the environment in which you're bringing a child, rearing a child, and to make sure that child has all the information in order to be a whole, healthy, contributing adult in the world. That's your responsibility.
Visit the website, JonettaRoseBarras.com. Thank you for the extra 5 minutes. I was really looking forward to hearing your thoughts on that.
Thank you so much, Gus. I had a great time and look forward to talking to you again very soon.
Absolutely. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and we will be in touch with you soon. Take care, Ms. Barras.
All right. Bye-bye.
Good evening. Context of White Supremacy. Visit the website. It is her name, JonettaRoseBarras.com. JonettaRoseBarras.com. There were folks who called in. I saw 1804 who had questions and what have you, and she was only doing an hour. Hopefully we can just have her back on, and maybe we can just devote the whole program to questions so folks can get in, because I suspect that this is a topic that people would have things to say. And I told some of the people that were commenting on the Facebook pages, if you want to discuss this matter, I'm definitely open and encourage and invite people to dial in if you want to talk about this issue. I actually have some of the suggestions that she has in the book. I want to read a few of those after the commercial break. But then if anybody, this is something that you've been dealing with, either side, anywhere around, if you're a father and, you've had a difficult time trying to make things work, patching things up with a daughter, or if you're a daughter and the opposite end of the spectrum, definitely want to make sure we devote time to that, and folks can share whatever they like. And I'll read some suggestions because she has some great information in the book. So I'll do that after the commercial break. One thing that I will do really quick before we go to the commercial, people email a lot. It's hard for me to keep up with the email, but I do my best. And if I didn't respond, just email again. I appreciate the comments and everything. Folks really keep me on my toes when I'm slacking and I fall behind on my counter-racist grind. People are watching, looking for information, looking for guests and all that. So I appreciate it. If I don't respond, you didn't hear back, just shoot me another email. It's no problem. Just shoot another email, and you can even put in the email, this is the second one or the third one, and blah blah blah. It's no big deal. Just send another one, untiljustice@gmail.com. I just don't want to be in any spam groups. Don't put me in any. I hate all of that stuff, just getting random email from groups. But if you have a suggestion or you're confused, you're trying to get archives, people email and are trying to find programs from the past or what have you, just shoot an email and I will get to you. One of our listeners wrote in and they said, I was listening to the program with Dr. Timothy Furnish, racist suspect, and at the end you mentioned something about Irritated Genie. You stated he worked for Homeland Security, and I believe that you said you no longer are listening to him. The question I have is, what was his job within that organization, and was it causing problems with non-white people? I used to listen to him about a couple of years ago before I heard about where he worked. I also no longer listen to him and have nothing good to say about him. Would you consider this anti-black behavior just because a person works for a questionable company? I am sure there are a lot of non-whites that work for questionable companies, even the ones that call and listen to your program. Have you considered to have him on your program? When is it okay to disregard a victim? I'll see if I can answer this one, and then we can take our commercial break. So the first question, Irritated Genie, what was his job within that organization, and was it causing problems for non-white people? I do not recall all of the specifics. It's been some years ago. I know in the archives, when this was fresh back in 2010, I remember reading the page from the Homeland Security website that had his name, Ayo Kamathi, as well as his duties and responsibilities. And if I really wanted to dig into all this, someone has emailed me additional information that sounded even more suspicious. He would be the best person to ask. He admitted on a live broadcast, he admitted working for Homeland Security. So, he would be the best person to ask whether he works there now or not, what his duties are. He would be the best person to ask about what he does there, what are his duties. Let's see. And if it causes problems to non-white people once you find out exactly what it is that he does. Let's see, the next question. Would you consider this anti-black behavior just because a person works for a questionable company? I will answer it this way. It could be. It could be. The anti-blackness is pretty thick. As Dr. Cambon said, I think it has saturated us on a cellular level. So this could be anti-black behavior on my part, and just, not supporting another non-white person victim of racism. It could be. However, I would say I don't think so. I'm willing to admit that that's possible, but I don't think so. And I can tell you the specific reason that I think is very logical. It's not just that he admitted working for Homeland Security. It is the fact that he admitted working for Homeland Security in conjunction with the fact that he advocated publicly counter-violence against white people. He said on this program, July 2010, he talked about organizing in cells. that is very suspicious behavior. Now, at the time he said it, I didn't know he worked for Homeland Security, but that is very suspicious to have someone who works for Homeland Security who's saying things like this. And then even after our breach, when he was no longer on the program, I heard him do another broadcast where he was talking about black people who participate in so-called homosexual behavior. And he was saying things that was suggesting maybe we should be using violence against these people because we don't support this behavior. That to me is also extremely suspicious. That's like two gigantic red flags to have someone who is suggesting potentially criminal behavior that the very organization that he works for is supposed to be investigating, prosecuting, detaining these sort of people. It's alarmingly suspicious. This is not just, Irritated Genie works at McDonald's and they put all that bad food in the community and it's toxic and blah, blah. I mean, everybody, regardless of what you do, you support the system of racism, white supremacy. This, at least for me, is a lot more sinister. And anyone who is confused, all you have to do is Google Stephen Lawrence or Doreen Lawrence, either or. All you have to do is check either of those, and you will see the big news that there was someone working for enforcement agencies in London who had infiltrated their group and was spying on the whole family, pretending like they were against racism and they were outraged about the death of her son. And this person is an informant. He's just going and getting information. And the family had been saying they wondered how it seemed the police were so informed about them and their family. It seemed like they knew so much about them. It's a long legacy. We've done this. I would mention anyone who knows Chicago. His name will come to me in a moment. Chicago, he was a member of the Black Panther Party. Fred Hampton. That would be a homework assignment. Anybody who doesn't see anything wrong with that, that's not strange, that's not suspicious, that's not at least worth a few questions. I'm not even saying not to listen to him, but I mean, if that's not suspicious, I would say research Fred Hampton, how he died. And I'll leave it there. If you need a book to get you started, I can give you a book and a program to get you started. The book would be Kenneth O'Reilly, The FBI's Secret File on Black America from 1960 to 1972, Racial Matters. Dr. Kenneth O'Reilly. The book is Racial Matters, The FBI's Secret File on Black America from 1960 to 1972. It's a white person, Dr. Kenneth O'Reilly. He's been a guest on the program actually twice. He was a guest on the program in April of 2009, and we discussed that book and the murder of Fred Hampton specifically. That will give you a start as to why this is suspicious. Let me make sure I've answered all of his questions. Would you consider saying I got that one? Have you ever considered having him back on the program? No, I would not be interested. He's been on a bunch. We had our conversation. I felt like he was not giving accurate answers. He used the word untrue. I felt like he wasn't giving accurate answers, and I'm good. He admitted working for Homeland Security. That was undisputed, and he admitted that on a live broadcast, so I'm good. I would encourage folks, if you listen, just to ask questions, particularly around what's been happening with Edward Snowden and all the investigating. Ask him some questions about that, man. Have they been snooping on our emails? When is it okay to disregard? Okay, this is the last question. When is it okay to disregard a victim? I'm not really sure what he means by disregard a victim. Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., his book is titled The United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept. Those first words, United Independent. I don't view myself as being attached to every individual who is a victim of racism. Just because the person is black doesn't mean that I automatically think that me and this person are homies, me and this person are down, that this person has my best interest at heart. I just don't think that way. The only thing that I think is that me and this person have a common enemy. White people. Racist man, racist woman, racist child. That's it. Now, I could be wrong. Other people don't have that view. That's why it says tiny.cc, one race. There is one race, the white race. Non-white people at this point, we are just victims of racism. We don't have a code with one another. We're not all in this together as one big brotherhood. I know we like to talk about that a lot, but that's not the case. It's obvious. You can look at our behavior. It's obvious that that's just not what it is right now. That can be changed. It can be better, but that's not what we have right now. So I just look at him as I do any other non-white person. He's another victim of racism. He's doing whatever he's doing. I don't think anyone can say that they hear me out actively working against him. I'm not out protesting what he's doing. I'm not out at his events picketing or anything like that. I don't think anyone can even say that they've heard me trying to discourage people from listening to his program. He's a victim of racism. He's not white. I don't have any confusion about that. I have suspicions about, whatever he's doing. And that's why I think I told Ross Tuttle, racist suspect, I told him last week, I don't make an assumption with anybody, racist or victim, white or non-white. I don't make an assumption that that person is about justice. I mean, that is just lunacy in my mind. People that listen to this program, whatever, I just don't make that assumption. It's a very dangerous and confusing environment to be in, but I think, unfortunately, that's what I think makes it so difficult to try to go about solving this problem. But he's just another victim of racism. I'm a victim of racism, and we're stumbling and fumbling trying to solve this problem. I hope that answered all of the questions. If I have been confusing and or unclear, you can let me know. I don't want this to divert from the topic, but I did want to make sure I knock out some of these emails and questions that are piling. We will take a commercial break. We'll get a sound clip. This is our guest talking about President Barack Obama with Armstrong Williams, no less. We'll hear that. We'll take our commercial, and then we will hear Melissa Harris Perry's commentary on Serena Williams. Once all that is done, if anyone wants to dial in and give thoughts about our subject for this evening's program, Fatherlessness, and the great book, Whatever Happened to Daddy's Little Girl, we will have ample time to do all of the above. We'll do the sound clips and be right back. Context of White Supremacy.
Hi, join me this weekend. Don't miss it. The Right Side with your host, Armstrong Williams.
Hello, everybody. I'm Armstrong Williams, and we're talking about the man that I voted for as President of the United States, Barack Hussein Obama. Yes, I voted for him.
Really?
Yes, I voted for him. That's no secret. You know what? I actually felt a little vindicated early on when the president sort of indicated that he was willing to work with the Republican leadership, and I never thought it was possible for him to change. I have you guys today. Let me tell you about the show today. Mark Hyman is just prolific. He's with Sinclair Broadcasting. He's a commentator, radio and TV and print. I mean, I respect him because he always gets it before everybody else does. And he's an unapologetic conservative. Mm-hmm. And we respect that. And Jonetta Rose Barras is probably one of the most objective and fair-minded journalists I've ever met in my life. Now, Mark's not objective. No, she didn't pretend to be objective today. But you are. So we have a balance. That's why I didn't agree with NBC for not allowing Keith Olbermann to give contributions to the candidate of his choice. He's no journalist. He's a talking head. Sean Hannity has a lot to do. Let Keith Olbermann give that money. He's not helping him. Right. Let him give it anyhow. Won't have much return on his investment. So, but anyhow, we're having fun today. Mark Hyman, talk about candidate Obama versus President Obama, and juxtapose the two men as to why one was so incredibly energetic, transformative, connected with the people. But that's not the president we've seen of late.
Well, first of all, I have to make one correction. My teenage children tell me I don't get it before anybody else does. I'm way behind the rest of the crowd. Teenage children make it clear that we're just not where we should be when we're parents.
Nobody gets it.
No, not at all. Certainly, the circumstances lent themselves for President Obama as a candidate to really ride that groundswell into office. He certainly is an energetic speaker. He's youthful. He represents, I think, a term that we don't talk about much anymore in America, kind of that melting pot from diverse family backgrounds. So it was a perfect storm for him, and certainly an energized, young public, not particularly in favor of what was going on in Iraq and to a lesser extent Afghanistan in the 2006-2000 time frame, and that led into the 2008 election. So he really was at the right place at the right time. to take nothing away from him as a candidate, he certainly was a very dynamic candidate, appeared well in public. But there's a big difference between practicing and suiting up for the game. What's happened in the game is, it's my sense that this man is not the most talented man when he walks into the room when it comes to these issues. He doesn't seem to have the command of the ship of state right now. It's being handled at the cabinet level. It's being handled a lot in Congress. And he's still more of a campaigner. He's not a doer. He's the guy who may excel well in practice, but when it comes to the playing field, it doesn't bring his A game, and that appears to be part of the challenges in connecting with the public, because the public, by and large, has not been happy with a number of the major programs that have been implemented during his administration.
Jonetta, now what Mark is saying has a lot of validity to it, but is it a staffing issue? Is it his political director? Is it Valerie Jarrett? Is it that he tried to bring Chicago to Washington and Chicago is not prepared to rule and lead the free world?
I think that the president has made mistakes in three major areas: in politics, in how he has managed himself from his campaign to his office. I think he forgot his base. He pulled together a real fragile coalition of voters: young voters, independent voters, disaffected Democratic voters. Some of his voters had never voted before. You've got to kind of nurture that coalition. He didn't nurture that coalition. He was an outside man who forgot he was an outside man, came inside and thought he was part of the group. That's because he hired the wrong people. He hired inside people. He hired Rahm Emanuel, whom I like. I mean, I think he's a really good strategist, but he wasn't the right person for Barack Obama.
Check our local listings. Go to ArmstrongWilliams.com, click on TV, and you will see the Sinclair affiliates and exactly where the program and time of airing in your market.
Obviously, he knew that it was important because he had the stimulus, they had TARP, they had the stimulus package. So you knew it was important, but he wasn't in the weeds enough on that issue, and that was because he had Larry Summers and those people from the Clinton administration who I just thought were the wrong people for the time that he was in. And so I think what happened is that he forgot who he was. He is a centrist. He's not a liberal in a sense that we see Nancy Pelosi. So? Absolutely not. He's absolutely a centrist. And if he had governed the way he campaigned with everyone in mind. He governed with only the liberal part of the party in mind, which is why I think he couldn't connect with some of the moderate Republicans in Congress.
RacismDaily.com, your number one source for global news reports on race, racism, and overt actions of white supremacy. From Asia to the Americas, to Europe, to Australia, to Africa, racism is not a thing of the past. It is our current reality. Be informed. Be globally informed. You should be the first to know. RacismDaily.com, RacismDaily.com, RacismDaily.com.
Is racism hurting you? On issues of race, are you unable to speak, think, and act with clarity and confidence? Are you tired of laughing when nothing is funny, smiling when you are not happy, agreeing when you really disagree? At counterracism.com, you can learn specific strategies and techniques to counter the behaviors of the people who practice racism in all areas of activity, using words correctly, following counter-racist logic, even counter-racist science projects designed to reveal what racism is, how it works, and how to counter it. The open-source code writing format allows you to pick and choose from a variety of counter-racist suggestions so you can produce the code that works for you. Stop by counterracism.com today and help replace racism with justice.
That's counter-racism.com.
Do you need a one-stop shop for all of your multimedia needs?
Triumphant Multimedia is a skilled team of professionals with a passion for great marketing and chic design. Our specialties include consulting, brand development, copywriting, and creative graphic design that's second to none. We also offer photography, photo retouching, videography, and video editing. At Triumphant Multimedia, our goal is to provide highly effective creative solutions built to suit any individual need or budget. Give us a call at 678-732-8067 or check us out online at TRIMultimedia.com.
Hi everyone, welcome. This is Justice with the C.O.W.S radio program. If you want to learn about, understand, and counter racism, white supremacy, be sure not to miss a C.O.W.S episode. We keep them jammed, packed with constructive information to sharpen your use of words to help eliminate the system of racism, white supremacy, ASAP. Also, to be able to invest in my counter-racist efforts, co-hosting the C.O.W.S radio program, please visit my blog, justdojustice.blogspot.com.
You're just saying just buckets and buckets of words.
I got an uncle real crazy. My Uncle B, 55 years old, hates white people, married to a white lady. And he's sitting around going, these crackers ain't shit, except for Susan. He tried to explain the whole thing to me one day, say, yeah, I got a white wife, I love her, she love me, that's all that matter. But I tell you this, if the revolution ever come, I'll kill her first. Just to show these crackers I mean business. Motherfucking cracker ass, motherfucking cracker. Shit, cracker, motherfucker. Hey, hi, honey. Motherfucking cracker, I'll kill my cracker kids too.
Here in Nerdland, we love Serena Williams. Remember when we talked with the Venus and Serena filmmaker about what makes these young women so unique in the world of sports? Remember when Serena was playing in her French Open match during the show a few weeks ago? We kept flipping the channel to watch her during our own commercial breaks. We respect and adore the Williams sisters, which is why it gives me no pleasure to address this week's letter to Serena Williams in light of her appalling comments and half-hearted apology regarding the teen girl who survived rape by 2 high school football players in Steubenville, Ohio. Dear Serena, it's me, Melissa. I was shocked to read your response to Stephen Roderick of Rolling Stone when he asked you about the Steubenville rape. According to Roderick, you said, "I'm not blaming the girl. But if you're a 16-year-old and you're drunk like that, your parents should teach you, don't take drinks from other people. She's 16. Why was she that drunk where she doesn't remember? It could have been much worse. She's lucky." Obviously, I don't know, maybe she wasn't a virgin, but she shouldn't have put herself in that position unless they slipped her something, then that's different. Honestly, I don't know where to begin, Serena. There are so many layers of victim blaming and slut shaming in your words that if I was feeling snarky, I'd suggest you run for Congress, since these ideas make you sound like the War on Women Republicans who are running the place. But I don't feel snarky. I feel sad. I'm not sure I can express how much your accomplishments have meant to so many of us over the years. It is not just the sheer athleticism and the brilliant strategy and the game-altering style of your play. We are moved by your uncompromising determination to be yourself, to embrace and flaunt your whole badass Serena-ness. When we watch you, it lifts us and makes us believe in things bigger than ourselves, which is why your words stung so much. We understand you're a woman who suffers no fools, who abhors weakness, and believes deeply in personal responsibility. We love and respect you for that. But you turn those traits against the victim instead of against the perpetrators. Imagine if you had demanded personal responsibility from the rapists. If you'd said, "I don't care if a girl is drunk at a party, you have no right to touch her without her consent. I don't care if you're young and foolish, that is no excuse for rape." Those boys should have had parents who taught them better than to victimize the vulnerable. Where were their parents when they were out late at night assaulting a girl? Serena, did you ever even question, or does it matter to you if her rapists were virgins or sluts? Healing from rape is a long journey. One of the most painful parts for survivors is having to deal with how much we blame ourselves for being assaulted. For years, we tend to believe we caused it, that we're bad, that we're dirty, that we somehow deserve the abuse. Sometimes we just need to hear someone we love and admire and trust to tell us over and over again, it is not your fault. We can't hear those words enough because those are the words that replace the things the rapist said to us. Those are the words that give us back the power and the willingness to go on and heal. Serena, your life and accomplishments have been a light of inspiration for so many. Please don't use your words to push some of us back into the darkness of shame. Sincerely, Melissa.
Context of White Supremacy. I will repeat, I said yesterday, Melissa Harris Perry is a victim of white supremacy and a victim of sexual trauma. She has discussed this on her program before. She said what she said, victim of racism. You can read the Rolling Stone article where all of the genesis for all of this, you can check it. I put it on my Facebook page. It is a lengthy article. It's like 4 pages, and it's got, you can read and come to your own conclusions. If you want to participate, the number is 760-569-7676, and the code is 564943#. Press *6 if you would like to participate. The number again, 760-569-7676, and the code is 564943#. Press *6 if you would like to participate. The new flash phone setup should be working as well. Same procedure. Press *6 and you can participate as well. I will share a few of the suggestions as I said I would, and then if anyone has any comments on this subject matter, folks would like to share, you can feel free to chime in. This is on page 156 of Whatever Happened to Daddy's Little Girl, the Impact of Fatherlessness on Black Women. And these are just a few tips. She has, I think, about 12. Oh, it's about 20. I won't read all 20 of them. I'll read 10. We'll do that. I'll read 10 of them, and then if folks would like to hear the other 10, they can let me know. We'll do it that way. So I'll read the first 10. Achieving true sexual healing sometimes means abstaining from sex. Love and sex are not synonymous. Determine which you are seeking. If it's love, hold off a little while on the sex. Try to imagine what would happen if you or your partner suddenly became physically incapacitated. Could your relationship survive? Would you know he loved you, even if he didn't make love with you physically? Abstinence doesn't always mean physical abstinence. It could mean emotional abstinence, which protects the heart from seeking love for the wrong reasons. Number 2, substitution is a wonderful solution for fatherless daughters who find themselves obsessed with the notion of having a baby. Take the drive to the nearest Hale House or hospital where infants have been abandoned and need human touch. Try mentoring a young girl. Volunteer at a local recreation center. Enjoy the children in your neighborhood. Once upon a time in African American communities, it didn't matter whose child you were, you belonged to the community, and everyone watched out for you and treated you as their own. There is nothing to stop us from reviving that tradition. Number 3, develop platonic friendships. Such associations offer fatherless girl or woman an opportunity to better understand the male species, to feel comfortable in his world, and to distinguish a male friend from the father we unconsciously long for. I go to brunch with platonic male friends, to the movies, to dinner, to professional events. Some women may not believe this, but I have learned that men also like having platonic relationships. They can relax, free of the need to perform, and they can talk about other women. What to do about this one who is ready to get married after knowing him for only 3 months? or that one who is afraid to be close. Sometimes we know the real reason for her behavior, even when she isn't telling him. Number 4, take time to reflect. If we took time to reflect between intimate relationships, the time to chart the patterns in our sexual encounters and failed relationships, why we entered them, when we entered them, and how we entered them, we would come to understand the flaw in our behavior. The point of reflection is not to assess blame or to ensure you have the latest HIV test before moving on, but to have a wholesome dialogue with yourself about what and who you are actually seeking. After a while, you come to know yourself. Number 5, trusting others can come only when you trust yourself. Knowing yourself helps you develop confidence in your relationships with others. The constant need to please and convince others that they shouldn't reject you or abandon you is diminished. You also stop believing that every person is poised to reject you. Therefore, you are willing to move in a little closer. You are willing to make a commitment. You trust that you can handle the situation because, yes, you have what it takes. And when you don't have what it takes, you know that too, and you walk away not out of fear that the other person will leave you first, but because he or the situation is something you don't want. Number 6, unlink love and loss. See them as separate dancers in a room. Reach for love. Hold his hand. Move across the ballroom floor. Fluidly, without any stumbling, as sure of his rhythm as you are of your own name. Number 7, face the difficulties. Life is one big, exciting challenge. We grow from the tough times. So he has to go to work and it's Saturday. Find something to do with yourself. Don't cling. He will come back. You can't agree on whether to go to dinner or stay home. He wants to watch the game. You want to have a nice meal with candlelight and wine. Talk it through. Be willing not to get your way all the time without thinking he has disconnected emotionally or escalating difference into dispute. That he doesn't want to be with you every minute of the day doesn't mean he's looking for another woman. Relax. Even if he is looking, the world won't end. Number 8. Sometimes it's better to fight than flee. It can get downright tiresome running every time something goes wrong in a relationship. Ask Judith Scott. For years, that's what she did. Most fatherless daughters will flee instead of staying and fighting for a relationship. Their flight is a testimonial to their own sense of self-worth and their confidence in their abilities. It is also a clear indication of their deep-seated fears. What if she stays and then he goes? Then once again she is rejected. So she goes first. Sometimes we should run from a situation or a relationship as fast as we can. Other times we need to give ourselves an opportunity to know other people, time to work through difficulties, time to reconstruct our perceptions. We need to give ourselves time to see that we can make a commitment, that someone can make a commitment to us, and the world won't end. Number 9, take a lesson from soap operas like As the World Turns, but forget the drama. Each day there is some traumatic episode to report. Some woman has run off with another woman's husband. Someone has lost a job. A cousin in the family has lost a baby. Each day the same cast of characters appears, affected but not destroyed by the tragedy of the moment. The next day it all begins again. Some of yesterday's problems have been solved. There are new challenges to surpass. The world still turns. Number 10. It is better to be alone than to be living at half throttle. Mary Ann Williamson wrote, Gwendolyn Brooks, taking the same perspective in her book Aloneness, reminds us that aloneness and loneliness are not the same. Loneliness, Brooks says, is the absence of something or someone. Aloneness can be delicious. You are with yourself, enjoying every minute of it. loneliness can be turned into a pleasurable aloneness. Those are the 10. If you are interested in hearing the other 10, folks can chime in and say what for. If folks are interested in continuing on the subject matter, feel free to chime in. I have said before, mommy's very important. Fathers, very important as well. Non-white folks attempting to be parents under the worst of circumstances. I know we have a significant number, I think, of parents who listen into the program for the attempted fathers out there. I know Mr. Edward Williams with Counter-Racism. He's an attempted father. I think S. He was just talking about his sessions with fathers over the weekend on the compensatory call-in. I know Khalif Muhammad, a.k.a. SinQ. He's been a guest on the program several times over and calls in when he is able. He's also an attempted father. Non-Mighty Wick track was played on the weekend broadcast, as well as the RAD, Racism Avoidance Disorder, attempted father. Neely Fuller Jr., attempted father. Fathers are important. Folks out there understanding of racism, white supremacy, and working to do what they can to pass that information on and crank out that next generation of counter-racist warriors who will hopefully solve the problem. I think we have some others too that I know of. You have to give me a caller Machiavelli out in the UK who dials in. I think he's an attempted father as well who dials into the program. Mr. Nero as well. Didn't forget about him. Also attempted father. We have quite a few of them. Let's see. 1804. If there's anyone that wants to chat on the subject matter we were talking about, fatherlessness, if anyone wants to chime in, I know there were people that were talking on the Facebook page about dialing in. If anybody wants to talk about that, I definitely would like to devote a little time for that. If anybody, 1804, your line should be open. Anybody else if they had anything to say on that subject?
Thanks, Gus. Currently, I'm listening. Thanks again for a wonderful show.
Right. On the wave, perhaps folks are spectating today. I thought this was an important topic. I'll give folks a minute. If everybody is fine, that's cool. And the gang, too. I do not mind taking some time to prop my feet up. But I did think this was an important topic. Definitely would encourage folks to share if they had any thoughts. The person that dialed in just got a hand up. Person that dialed in, your line should be open. Say something else.
Hello?
Okay, we can hear you. Oh, wait a minute. It's breaking up a little bit.
Can you speak up?
Your sound's garbled. Like your line is breaking up a little bit.
Okay. Can you? Oh, no. Let me call back.
Okay. Yeah. Hang up and dial back in and see if that works.
This is 1804. Can I be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to say that I have experienced fatherlessness through loss, through my father died, and for me, what it translates into, I don't know if she talked about this, I didn't get to hear her whole intervention, is something of a fear of giving birth, something of a fear of bringing, having a child who might experience more loss. And so, that's just kind of how I have a lot of observations, but, some of it is pretty private, but that's how some of that manifests for me, and it doesn't help that we live under a system of white supremacy, and so that's like a double I'm not certain that this is worth it for. And I've heard other victims. Yeah, exactly. I've heard other victims express it on other counter-racist shows that, definitely, you start wondering, really, what is the worth of, if it's going to be single motherhood, based on the odds or based on your own personal experience, as a child, as a fatherless daughter, is it really worth it, to birth another victim? You know what I mean? And this is something that I know that our ancestors went through as slaves. There was infanticide. There were slaves who decided this wasn't worth it. And I know that as we're facing potential numbers drops, this may not be a popular sentiment, but it is an honest one. So I'm going to stop here.
Let's see. The person, I think this is only the person that tried it before. Let's see if it's working this time. Go ahead. Your line should be open. The other person that dialed in with a hand up.
Hello?
Oh, it's much better this time.
Cool beans. Good evening. I was just wondering if you could speak the last 10 suggestions, if you could, please.
Oh, all right. Let's see. So this is on 159. She has 10 others. When you find the right mate, I'm going to mute your line just so that I can read, and then I'll unmute it again. Number 11, when you find the right mate, be honest. Tell your partner, the one who hung in there with you, even though you waited months before making love, the one who has become a real friend, the one about whom you've reflected, the one you see as love, unlinked from thoughts of loss, that sometimes you are a basket case, you experience a certain syndrome. Explain to him what it means and what he can expect. Number 12, don't use food, drugs, or work to fill the lonely spaces. Abusing any of them can only cause greater problems. If you overeat, redefine the role of food in your life. If you become addicted to foods, drugs, alcohol, sex, or work, seek out any of the various AA programs which are based on the wonderful 12-step model. Number 13, end your relationship with over-control. Control is central to compulsion. Janine Roth notes, love and compulsion cannot coexist. Compulsion is the act of wrapping ourselves around an activity, a substance, or a person to survive, to tolerate, to numb our experience of the moment. Love is a state of connectedness, one that includes vulnerability, surrender, self-valuing, steadiness, and a willingness to face rather than run from the worst of ourselves. Compulsion is a state of isolation, she continues, one that includes self-absorption, invulnerability, low self-esteem, unpredictability, and fear that if we face our pain, it would destroy us. Number 14, learn the difference between the things you can change and those you simply can't, regardless of how much huffing and puffing you do. Many years ago, when I lived in San Francisco, I was sitting in a car at a service station while a girlfriend pumped gas. An old African-American man had been sitting in a chair. He came up to my side of the car and said, "Honey, what are you worrying about? It's just a waste of time. If it ain't happened, it might not happen. If it has already happened, there's nothing you can do to undo it." And then, I kid you not, he walked away. I had been worrying about my job and events that had occurred 2 days earlier. It took me many more years before I could put that advice into practice, even partially because I always believed I could control every detail and experience of my life. That was so foolish. Now, when I catch myself trying to manipulate and maneuver for the purpose of controlling an outcome, I simply ask, what would happen if? If the worst thing I could think of did come true, if he left, if he never came back, would I die? In 1988, I may have thought that breakup with my boyfriend would end my world. Today, I have come to appreciate my resilience. I can't always handle every situation, but many I can, and when I can't, I'm smart enough now to reach out to friends. I don't have to do it all alone. Number 15. Amazon women are an endangered species. Don't join that tribe. There is a reason these tough, hard-working superwomen end up either alone or dead. It's simply too much for them. Absolutely exhausting. Such behavior won't get the fatherless woman the relationship she wants with a man. Why would any male mate want such a woman? What role could he play in the partnership if she commandeers the masculine? And while isolation built the wall of protection around her, keeping others outside, she will discover that a lonely splendor is not what she wanted after all. Number 16. Reclaim your femininity. Being a woman doesn't mean being helpless, but it also doesn't mean being a cold steel being. Rather, there is a great strength in the feminine. Ask any man. Number 17. Beating up on the world won't bring him back. Anger is as much a natural response to loss as sadness and grief. When you so much as break a glass at home, you are angry, especially if it's one of your best glasses. So why shouldn't you be angry if your relationship with your father has been broken, especially if that rupture was not a result of anything you did? But just as beating your neighbor who wasn't even in your home when the glass was broken isn't rational, whipping the hell out of the world won't bring your daddy back. Check out the reason for your anger. Is it rational or irrational? Beth Erickson notes that when loss is chronic and unresolved, all emotions have long since gone underground. Usually, they leak out as displaced anger that smolders just under the surface. Like a fireman searching for hidden heat and potential danger, you may want to locate the smoldering emotions that Erickson talks about. If it's old daddy stuff, douse it. Number 18. Don't turn the dagger on yourself. Now that you've quenched the fires of the unfounded anger you felt for others around you, don't turn it on yourself. The loss of your father or of subsequent relationships in which you hoped to recapture the paternal love is not reason enough to destroy yourself. If causing injury to others doesn't bring your father back, neither will causing injury to yourself. If you feel suicidal or entertain thoughts of doing bodily harm to yourself, including actions associated with bulimia, anorexia, and substance abuse, seek help immediately. If you don't know where to go, simply call the nearest hospital. Experts there can refer you to the right person or organization. Number 19. Listen to the voice within. If you are angry, acknowledge that anger. Try to discern the reason for it. Try to direct the anger properly. If you lost your father through death, then you did not play a role in that. You can't be angry with yourself. If he did not take care of himself and died from poor health, then you can't bring him back. Forgive him and move on. Try to find a way other than anger to channel your grief. I'll give you a few suggestions in later chapters. If you lost your father through divorce and he didn't maintain a relationship with you, reach out to him. Don't try to hide your anger. Present it in a healthy dialogue about the pain you experienced. See later chapters for more on this. Try to understand that as a child we saw the world differently. Our parents couldn't always articulate the challenges they faced. They made mistakes too. Forgive them and move on. Number 20. When you ask, Whew. Man, I guess I got to read this the way it is, but wow. Number 20, when you ask, who is the fairest one of all, make sure your mirror says you. Now, just that right there. I shouldn't editorialize. I won't editorialize. I'll read. Building self-esteem is critical to the fatherless daughter, and yet it may be the most difficult task she faces as she attempts to heal her loss. The first thing to remember is that your father's absence has nothing to do with you. Our egos may want us to think we were a factor, but we weren't. Although my mother said she didn't want John, my biological father, to see me because he threatened to take me away, the real reason is connected more to their dysfunctional relationship. I dismiss her logic and with it eliminate myself as the cause. I have learned through the years that controlling my ego gives me the opportunity to appreciate myself as I am. I think of myself as yet another of nature's wondrous snowflakes, each still unique among the millions of unique others. Growing to know yourself leads to growing to love others, flaws and all. It took almost 20 years after I wrote the poem Peace before I really found peace and truly learned to love my wide ass and spaghetti thin legs. Now that I have found a light no one can extinguish. Self-love. Without it, I can never know real love. She actually has 25. I guess I'll read one more and then you can get the book for the last 4. So there, I'll read 2 more and that'll leave the rest of them. So 21, develop an internal locus. Several years ago, I took a gender communication class at Trinity College in Washington, D.C. There I learned that men have an internal locus while women have an external locus. That is, women often need external validation. Ever see the Special K cereal commercial on which the men are all spouting lines that we have heard women say, including, "Does my butt look too big in these pants?" It is a classic example of how we women, even those of us from 2-parent households, often think. What matters to us is what our girlfriends say, the compliments we get from our boyfriends. Fathers individuate their children. That is, they help them develop that all-important internal locus. Improving self-esteem means balancing that equation so that our opinions of ourselves become more important. Did you fight to get to the top because you wanted to hear the praise of your peers or to rub your father's nose into it, or because you wanted to achieve a personal, private goal that would make you happy? If it's the former and not the latter, then you've got problems. You don't think pleasing yourself is important enough. Change that. Number 22, everyone is worthy of love and worth loving. The greatest gift we can give to anyone, especially ourselves, is unconditional love. That doesn't mean we don't work to improve ourselves, take off those few extra pounds that threaten our health, take that Spanish course, etc. What it does mean is that we don't beat ourselves up and we don't allow others to abuse or humiliate us because we aren't perfect. I developed a reminder for myself after reading the book Jonathan Livingston Seagull, which describes the plight and determination of a young seagull who was not willing to spend his life in merely scavenging for food. He wanted to fly high and fast in the sky. When the elders of his village learned what he was up to, they banished him from their group. Jonathan continued with his mission. Finally, when he reached what appeared to be perfection, 2 other seagulls guided him to another land. Essentially, Jonathan died. From that book, I learned that perfection comes with death. All of us struggling here on earth are still imperfect beings. We are all in more or less the same incomplete and perhaps misshapen vessels. So, when I or anyone else whips me over my imperfections, I smile and love myself, warts and all, even more fiercely. And because I want unconditional love, I am learning every day how to give it to others. Can't have one-way streets where love is concerned. The last three suggestions, number 23 is March Past the Pain. Number 24 is There is a Big Wonderful World Awaiting Your Full Undivided Attention. And 25 is Sing Your Own Song, Not Strange Fruit, and Not the Blues. You can get the book to get those last few. One thing I will point out quickly about number 20, and then if you all have any thoughts on the suggestions or other related issues. I mean, that's you, and this is not a criticism. I'm just pointing out this is how racism, white supremacy, like when Dr. Cambon says it has impacted us on a cellular level, when everything about the environment that we are in is saturated, supporting the system of racism, white supremacy. Now, when you ask, who is the fairest one of all, make sure your mirror says you. Now, if you are not white, your brain computer, and I believe this, and I think Dr. Welsing might co-sign with Gus on this one. We can ask her next time. But if you're asking yourself who's the fairest, and you are a non-white person, the answer is always going to be not you, nigger. Always, always, always. And I think as long as that's still in our brain computer, and under the system of racism, white supremacy, white people are determined to make sure that that part of the white chip is in every single one of our brain computers. They would like it to be there by the time we are conceived, really. But that association with beauty, attractiveness is supposed to be white person. Furthest thing from melanin you can possibly get. Albino. But just keeping that in mind, that's what we're associating with beauty. So when you go on, it says building self-esteem is critical. Absolutely. Self-esteem is a weapon of mass destruction. I think I heard that before. Building self-esteem is critical to the fatherless daughter, and yet it may be the most difficult task she faces as she attempts to heal her loss. The first thing to remember is that your father's absence has nothing to do with you. I'm skipping down just because later on she says, I think of myself as yet another of nature's wondrous snowflakes, and snowflakes, at least the ones that I think of, like I think most people, their immediate association with a snowflake would be white. And that's what I mean. It is ubiquitous under the system of racism, white supremacy. It is an omnipresent force, just with the way that we use words, the way that white people have groomed, the way that we speak, the way that we form our thoughts in our heads. The racism, white supremacy is already a component. It's already a part of the process. Like, you really have to be attentive to try to pick up on that sort of thing and really move away from that as much as possible. It is a process, and I think it's something that we all are still subject to, each and every last one of us, and will be as long as racism, white supremacy exists. But I think that's the sort of thing we should be mindful of. Yeah, words are important. I'll mute my line. The folks that are on the line, do you all have any thoughts?
This is 1804. Since you mentioned albinos, I believe I sent you via Facebook, I sent you the poster for this year's Human Rights Watch Film Festival. And the poster is a dark-skinned African woman, presumably African woman, and her albino baby. So it looks like white people are pushing the albino cause as the new hot human rights cause. And it sounds like, more than ever, they're just pushing subliminal messages on us that are supposed to, no disrespect to the albino cause, to the degree that albinos who are victims of racism, who are non-white, to the degree that they are persecuted in Africa. But to tell me that is the most pressing human rights cause, not that I believe in human rights either, which I believe is ultimately a concept that helps bolster the system of white supremacy, but I don't have time to explain why. But anyways, I just thought since you were on that topic, I just thought I'd bring that up, and I don't know if you you saw it. I sent you that poster on Facebook.
Oh, I'm looking at my Facebook now. They have been pushing the albino. I mean, it's racism, white supremacy, but they are always pushing it. Whether I get the clip in or not weekly on albino affairs, it's constant. I think. I don't know if it was this week or the week before, but they passed some sort of UN resolution, exactly what you're talking about, where they were saying, hey, man, albinos are being abused, and this is ridiculous. We cannot have this sort of thing. We have got to protect albino rights. This is at the UN. They're making this a global issue. Totally. Worldwide. This is an everyday thing. I'll make sure for this week, I'll make sure that I get a albino affairs segment in, because that's all day, every day, white people on their job.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Cool. I have a question. What if you don't believe in psychiatry or psychologists and stuff like that? Like, is talking to somebody, a regular person, just as effective, or what do you think?
If you don't believe in it, then that's probably going to have an impact on the effectiveness right there. So I would definitely say if it's something that you don't believe in, then that's no need in wasting our time right there. If you have people, if that's been effective for you, if it's worked, just being able to go and have people that you trust and you feel comfortable sharing and opening up with, and they can listen, they can provide what you need, that's going to help you, be able to solve problems and get to where you can deal with things, then, rock and roll.
All right. Let's say, I had I have a rocky relationship with my dad. And I'm trying to work on that. It's difficult because I've come to a point where I really don't sometimes I really don't even want to talk to him. Don't call him, stuff like that. And I want to know if was that 1804 or if you have any tips, you know what I mean, to help me work on that. And if I do talk to him, it's always a disagreement about something, especially white supremacy. So that's also a turnoff from having a conversation with him.
Does he not want to talk about racism?
He does, but what happens is that I get emotional when I talk about racism. So I guess I tend to either push him away, I would say.
Did you grow up in the same household with him? Have
No,
you
I did
always
not.
lived with him?
No, I did not. I grew up close to him. I grew up close to him. I could walk to his house, but I didn't live with him per se.
Did you have long periods where you were completely cut off from him, or where either you were not reaching out to him or he was not reaching out to you?
No, not really. No.
So he was always technically available to you.
He was available. Yeah, he was available to me. I don't know what happened, but there was somewhere along the relationship it broke down. Because I remember when I was younger and stuff, we used to go to football matches, soccer matches, and he used to bring me to school with him and stuff like that, and I was with him a lot. But once I know he got married and stuff, and things kind of broke down.
You mentioned soccer.
Yeah.
Are you from Latin America?
No, I'm from the Caribbean. I'm from Jamaica.
Okay.
So.
What would you say? At what point did you start feeling the? At what point would you say the estrangement started?
I would say pre-teen, teenager. I would say, yeah, in that area, yeah. I mean, as I said, like, he was physically there, but I mean, emotionally, he wasn't. I didn't really talk to my father about anything, like, really. Unless it was like, okay, my lunch money. But I didn't really, like, talk to him like that. But he was available.
When the emotion comes up, when you all are talking about racism, like, is it because, like, you think he's confused, or, like, can you give some detail about that?
Yeah, yeah, like he would say, okay, he would make comments like, "Oh, all black people are idiots. Look what's happened to them. It's all their fault." That kind of stuff. Like, he tells me I can't save the world. You can't save the world. Why you keep studying this stuff? You can't help anybody. You just need to go to work, go to school, make your money, and that's it. Buy your TV, buy your car, buy your house. That's it. I don't like to hear that stuff. To me, that's not encouraging. So that, like, stuff like that makes me not want to talk to him.
What's like, I'm trying to see how he would respond in that manner. Like, is it you all are talking about racism and you say something that prompts him to say that sort of thing, or how does the conversation go to where it gets to where he makes a comment like that?
Okay. All right. Like, the other day, I mentioned what's that lady's name? I think it's Michelle Alexander. Her book, The New Jim Crow.
Right.
And I was talking to him about it, and he just brought that up. Like, he's like, I see what you're saying. I understand what the book is saying, but, you know what I mean, black people just want to drive big cars, wear big chains, and not work for their money. Like that's that's him. That's him.
Now, have you tried, it sounds like, I mean, this is what I find with, emotion is not something that everybody can deal with,
Right.
including, me included. Sometimes, sometimes the emotion, if you, it's like that tip of the iceberg, and people feel like, well, if they start delving into it, they may completely, it may just be too overwhelming for them. So have you tried the technique that we use on the show, or that Neely Fuller suggests, of instead of making emotional statements, asking him questions?
Okay.
Do you want to try next time you see him that instead of forcing him to get to an emotional place where he may not be willing to get to, when he makes statements like that, well, black people just don't want to, black people just don't want to work. Have you tried just asking questions that might lead him to the answer that you would otherwise make in the emotional statement? And then my suspicion, although of course nothing is guaranteed, is that if you steer clear of the emotional statements for now, which obviously that's not working, and start maybe just when next time you see him, only on this topic, of course, not on other topics, but start, instead of making the emotional statements, asking 2 to 3, a few questions when he makes those statements that annoy you, and then leaving it at that. Try to essentially do what we do on the show with the guests.
Okay.
When we're at our best, when we're good, because we don't always succeed. And then see how that works.
Okay, I'll give it a try.
A listener, they wrote in, I got a chuckle out of this. They said, review the book study sessions of Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People from the Beginning. It might be of some help if they read it together with Father Forgets, with the W. Livingston Larned section, And this is where it's a father talking about his son and how he picks on him all day long and is, oh my gosh, you're messing this up. Da, 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 da. It's kind of talking about a father-child relationship. But actually that book might actually give some tips on, how to deal. One thing I would say that, I don't know if I say it enough, but I do not feel compelled to talk about racism just because I'm around other victims of racism. It has been my experience that it can go very bad in terms of producing conflict if the victims are confused about racism, white supremacy, especially if it's a victim of racism where we already have a relationship with some strain and some stress. I would probably be looking for topics that are a little safer, that won't be as potentially volatile, because the best of friends, people that are having sexual intercourse can have some really nasty spats about racism. So if you already got a tough relationship where it's not optimal, then, don't feel, this is me. I don't even feel like they can make any sort of statement, anything. I think it would be wonderful if they reinstated slavery tomorrow. I have been polishing my shackles and I'm looking for a new overseer. That's interesting. Do not feel compelled to argue, fight. You can, just make a mental note of that. Like, wow, the mental illness is much higher. And I say that because Dr. Welsing, when she says that no non-white people qualify for being mentally healthy, none of us. If that's really true, and we're saying, people that are more confused, it's even worse for them because they don't really grasp what's going on around them. They're even more confused about it. If that's true, then I really have to, alter my expectations for what this, like, I can't really be, I think I talked about this before, I can't really be jumping up and down. If this person, I've already said this person may be a little bit more confused about racism. It's like if I'm in a classroom with children, they have some problems, and I'm in a classroom and they can't quite get it. 1 + 1 is 4. It's 5. They're just not getting it. I have to alter my expectations. And people may say it sounds bad, but that's really what we're saying. If these people are more confused about racism, white supremacy, which is the greatest problem on the planet, if they are not mentally healthy, then I really need to keep that in the forefront of my mind with how I respond to them, and making sure that I'm not getting mad at someone who's confused. Maybe even I'm not getting too emotional. Regardless, like I should even be like, do you have that in your mind? Do you expect that your father is going to say something that just, I'm not insulting your father, I'm just trying to use a word to convey. Like, before you meet your father, do you expect, it's highly likely he could say something that's totally ludicrous because he's more confused about race. Like, do you have that in your mind?
Yes, I know that he does stuff like that, yes. But it's like I expect more from him.
Based on
I like good. He went to school. You go to school, you go to college and stuff like that. I expect you to have like certain kind of understanding of stuff. Like, this is stuff that you experience every day. You didn't grow up in like the suburbs. You came from the ghetto. Like, how do you make statements like that? Like, I don't understand. I don't understand. But yeah, basically, I expect it from him. But I still like kind of like hope or wished that he wasn't like that. Like, I wish he was like a father. Like, I don't like when I have to be telling him things about racism. Like, I'm like, yo, this and this and this. Like, I wish that he could tell me that stuff and tell my sister, my brother, instead of me trying to like get in there and try to educate him on stuff. Like, I wish he was a father in that regard.
Is it okay for me to ask like age? You don't have to tell me like exact year, but like the age range of your father?
He's I think he's like 49 right now.
Okay. It's I'm sure it's tons of non-white people listening to the program and wherever who say the same thing. It would have been so much more helpful if their parents especially a father who's supposed to be that protector, could have told them about racism, white supremacy, so that they could have been better prepared and not finding about it all late after they've made errors and what have you. I totally grasp, but I mean, for me, that's why that term victim is so helpful. Just in terms of keeping in mind when Esther Stanford Kosei, who recommended our guest for today, when she kept saying the word victim last week, she kept saying it and kept saying, this was in like the first 20 minutes of the program. And I said, you keep saying the word victim. It's a lot of non-white people, even some who listen to this program, is I'm not a victim. Don't you call me a victim. I don't like to think of myself as a victim. And I said, you keep using it. You seem not to have a problem with it. And she said, I'm speaking from a legal context, and I'm talking about a crime. And I use the term victim so that we make sure that we recognize and identify that this is a person who has been wronged. And I just wanted to repeat that like over and over and over. Like you said about your father, he's been to school, he's been to college. I would be willing to bet you my last dollar they did not have a course on white supremacy, racism, what it is and how it works. If anything, I would even say the evidence might even suggest the longer that you stay in racist academic institutions, the more confused you're going to be about racism, white supremacy. So, I mean, I know it's frustrating. I mean, it's a terrible situation. It's a terrible situation that we're in. But I mean, our parents, they are victims of racism. I'm sure for like 90% of our parents that are listening to the program, they don't know who Dr. Welsing is. They don't know who Amos Wilson is, Neely Fuller Jr., Marimba Ani. They don't know these people. They didn't have access to that information. They were and they went through a worse form of racism than we did. Just in terms of, if he's 50, well, 49, you said, I mean,
60.
Yeah, it's tough. That's all I can really say. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I mean, he grew up in Jamaica, though. I mean, I know it's not like that white and black in Jamaica. It's not like, you don't really see white people a lot over there. But it's, racism it's there too, because the lighter the better, the lighter the brighter. So.
Of course, I've been in Jamaica. You don't need any conversation about that. Already got that. Yeah, I mean, that's just, I would say again, also, I think that's why Mr. Fuller has in the code book about attempted parents and just recalibrating the way that we think about non-white people under the system of white supremacy. You just don't qualify. I mean, you can try your best, you can give it all you got, but I mean, you're just not gonna, as long as this system is in place, it's just not possible for you to be the type of parent that you want to be, the type of parent that you want to be, that we could be, should be. And just, for even, she says that in the book, Jonetta Rose Barras, just kind of understanding the flaws and errors of your parents, recognizing that, forgive and move forward. And I would say again too, not feeling compelled to talk about racism. Like if there's some topics that you all can talk about and you can relate and things are cool, like try to pick out those areas. And the question, I also thought what 1804 said about asking questions, I thought that was great as well. Just staying in that question lane as opposed to making statements so that you don't have to respond emotionally.
Yeah. Well, the thing about racism is that it's so hard to not talk about racism because it's everywhere. So how do you not, like, it's almost like when I don't talk about it, I feel like I'm hurting myself. Like, I feel like I'm doing something bad. Like, I think it's something that should be talked about, like, all the time.
Woo! I agree.
It's real difficult. I know it's real difficult for me.
This is Lashes.
Uh-huh.
Hi, to the caller who grew up in Jamaica, can you briefly describe how racism, white supremacy function there in a mainly, predominantly black country?
Let me see. Well, in school, you had to talk English. No broken English. At one point, I don't think you could wear like your hair natural to school. It had to be like permed or braided. in certain schools for a period of time, only lighter-skinned children could go there. Certain jobs, only lighter-skinned people could have those jobs, like banks and stuff like that. I mean, like even now in Jamaica, people who looks white or very light, they're in like higher levels in jobs and government and stuff like that. You know,
I'm aware that there are some Chinese Jamaicans there, because I met a Chinese man in New York City who had a Jamaican accent, and his whole behavior was pretty much that of a black person. So can you talk a little bit how that dynamic also operates in Jamaica with the system of racism, white supremacy?
And I mean, even the Chinese are still above the blacks in Jamaica, because even the Chinese have like businesses and stuff like that. So I mean, they usually like we call it like they come from uptown, which is the more like posh areas. But I would like to hear his accent, because sometimes by their accent you can tell like where they come from. Because he could have a Jamaican accent, but it could be like a uptown accent. You see what I'm saying? Or not really?
No, I understand what you mean. Like different regions have different accents.
Yeah.
You hear same thing. Yeah.
Caller from Jamaica, I just wanted to say, don't get discouraged. I've been there before, where people that I love who are older than me seem to be more confused about racism or less willing to talk about it. And I actually found trying to engage with them about it when they weren't open to it or didn't want to was actually more stressful and non-constructive. You know what I mean? And it made things worse between us. So I would find that with some of them, it was just too confusing to even bother when I would try to ask questions or responses that I would get. And I can understand, because of some of their backgrounds and ambiguity as far as racial classification and their age, why that might be the case. But I didn't look at them as less qualified, I guess, to parent me per se, because I didn't necessarily expect that. Like, I look at myself in a way, and I wish more people in my family saw me this way, but I look at myself being younger, having more energy and having more knowledge of the internet, the ability to research things more, you know, than the older people in my family, as being a potential gift to them if they would be open to receiving these things. But I understand with that, it's not wise to waste time and energy trying to make people take things that they're not ready for, because it can be overwhelming. And even myself, I feel overwhelmed at times with all the racism that I observe now that I'm less confused. So for a lot of the older people, they had a certain way of dealing with things, and there is a lot of confusion, but for a lot of them, you know, they may feel like they've been through enough stress in life and they don't want to talk about racism all the time. And their way of dealing with it is to, you know, I guess placate themselves and say things aren't so bad, things are better, because white people are more accepting of us, you know? But what could be helpful and might not be as confrontational, maybe if you're listening to the cows, you know, or some kind of program or something that is specifically about racism and they're around, and just see if they, you know, would have anything to say, or ask them, man, what do you think about that? Or, you know, and just maybe an open-ended question. But if they don't respond, I mean, you know, I don't know, I guess I never, most of the knowledge I got about racism when I started to become more aware was through books and readings and things, you know, when I was young and in high school, and I had some friends that were from Nation of Islam, and, you know, you would hear a few things here and there. But I guess I never had the expectation that my parents would teach me all these things, because there weren't a lot of people around me having intense dialogue about it. But there's one more person who I used to try to have conversations with, and it was so annoying, because it was like there was a white person in a black body just responding like as the, you know, the defense attorney for white people, and it used to burn me up. We used to have extended arguments over it. And eventually they confessed that they knew better and they had been taught a lot of things, but they went through something in their life that kind of caused them to check out of, you know, I guess, attempting to counter it. And it ended up being to the point where we actually it's one person I can actually talk to about anything regarding racism. And they love listening to Mr. Fuller. They're a lot more informed now, and like it's just a huge difference, you know. But for some people, it takes time. Some people may never get there, but I would say just value your relationship with your family members, you know, as much as you can without letting their knowledge or lack of knowledge about white supremacy make them less valuable to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I hope it was helpful.
Can I be heard?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
Can anyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Yeah, to the caller, I was going to say, I concluded that most, you know, you talked about how your dad, you know, he went to college and everything, and, you know, older, you know, you figure he would probably know more, be less confused about what's happening and everything, and just kind of be more informed to be able to share with you and your siblings and, you know, anybody else who would know, who would want to know something. I concluded that, you know, most non-white people are avoiding this information, you know, intentionally, you know, because it doesn't really resonate. It doesn't really connect with where they are, you know, mentally at this stage, you know, at this point in time, you know, to where, say, you could sit down and maybe listen to a C.O.W.S episode or something that Neely Fuller or Dr. Wells or somebody that, you know, is talking about, you know, correct life-saving information, you know, that you may just sit down and listen to it, and it might catch your attention to want to even maybe modify your behavior and do something about it, whereas your dad or somebody else who is avoiding this information could listen to it and it won't really connect with them in the same way, you know, to where they won't really, you know, continue to try to independently, you know, get more informed to do, you know, to do better. So, you know, what I've seen is that, so people like your dad, you know, may need a stronger counter-racist signal. And, you know, the way I look at that is just, it's going to, the way to offer or provide a stronger counter-racist signal is through kind of what, I don't want to missay your name, but the female who was just talking, she sounded like she had to improve herself in the way that she talked about racism with different people that she wanted to, you know, get better at doing it with. And so that's how I kind of picture providing a stronger counter-racist signal. You have to improve the way you talk about racism. I know you mentioned the way you get emotional on different things, and so that, you know, that's kind of, I think that's a normal part of the process. You know, you start learning about some of this stuff, you get upset, you know, kind of knowing that the way white people are mistreating everybody, you know, that's classified as non-white, and it's unjust, and it shouldn't be happening, and you look around and you think that people should be pretty burning up about that, and so it is upsetting, you know. But, you know, when you get more comfortable with being uncomfortable with all this stuff, you should get around to working on how you talk about it with people, particularly people closest to you, you know, your family members or, you know, attempted family members and all that, because that's where, you know, especially people that you already got some sort of relationship with like that. So, you know, that's the 2 cents I would say. You know, just try to improve the way you talk about anything, and it don't have to be about racism, you know, with your family, with your dad, because just and trying to talk to him about stuff that he wants to talk about. You know, because they, you know, people who are more confused about this, they pay attention to other stuff that's happening, and every now and then they might want to talk about it. But if you have increased your skill at the way you talk about racism, you can connect. Because like you said, it's in everything and it's everywhere, and so you can connect to what your dad is talking about and kind of tie it in, not in a way that makes him put up his, you know, self-appointed defense for white people, you know, thing that just pop up in us, you know. He's kind of presented in a way that they kind of bypasses that. So yeah, I mean, it's a process. So that's it.
Thank you.
Do you know what some of his like favorite television programs or movies are?
He likes to watch English Premier League.
Soccer,
he likes to watch
football, whatever.
Yeah. Not really. No, I don't like to watch football. That's about it. But I mean, he's up on like politics and stuff like that. It's like my dad has no problem talking about that stuff. He has no problem talking about racism and stuff like that. It's just that what gets me, like, it's his views on racism. He has no problem talking about it. He doesn't even get emotional talking about it. I'm the one that gets emotional talking about it because what he's saying to me doesn't make any sense. So.
This is page 104. Don't underestimate that the fact that somebody says something, especially something as dismissive as, well, most black people want to do X. You know, they want to just ride cars and blah, blah, blah. I mean, first of all, we don't say anything particularly different on this show. I mean, you know, he's not making, that's not necessarily a wrong observation, but you have no idea what he was like as a young person. You don't know if he wasn't more upset about racism then. You know, it could be like a long process that leads him to, I mean, a lot of us have parents who are very idealistic as young people, and then when they had children, they were kind of forced to have, to make a living, and then, the circumstances of life, and then all of a sudden they can't really delve into that part of themselves that's about their conscience and about, they're forced to function on a more practical level. But beyond that, I think also what happens to daughters vis-a-vis fathers, and I think we see a lot of that all over the web. Anybody who follows, there's a lot of forums of black women in particular that are very, very upset at black men, and I think it's because we expect fathers to protect. And so I think that what you're looking for is you're looking for your father to look out for you in the system, and so that's why you would have hoped that he would have talked to you about it. But can we get a show of hands on the people that are on this call of people who either of their parents, father or mother, prepared them for the system of white supremacy and explaining to them what we're learning on this show? How many of us have heard this stuff before now?
Not me, not in the way I learned from the cows and from Mr. Fuller and white people. No, never heard white people explain racism much before listening to the cows. My parents didn't either, so no, they did not prepare
Lashes, the answer is no.
Yeah, and me, the answer is definitely no for me too.
That's sad, though.
It is sad, but understand.
That's what domination looks like. That's what domination looks like.
Your situation, understand that your father is not any different from any victim of racism. Very few. Actually, if more of our parents were preparing us for the system, we'd probably be better off. We'd probably be better off. But one of the reasons we're victims is because, it's either a symptom or a cause or a reason is that precisely we don't even talk about the problem. And this is not just your father. This is us generally. Right? And then where does that come from? We have at the level of the White House, it is unfashionable, right? There's this notion we're post-racial. We're not supposed to talk about racism more than ever. But generally, there's always been a taboo. Part of the system of white supremacy is we're not supposed to talk about this problem. That's that's how we're dominated. So this is just so that you don't personalize it upon your father. And, maybe you'll get to see that if you talk to other people. You'll see that very few of us have parents who ever told us the degree to which we are dominated in the system, whoever broke down the system to us like Neely Fuller does.
The person that called in, I'm not sure if this is, I'll guess and say that this is Seed Planter. Seed Planter, you should be with us as well.
Greetings. Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Greetings to you, Gus, and the callers. I just had some advice for the caller from Jamaica. When I first learned about counter-racism, I had a discussion with my parents about it. And my mom, she's a very serious Christian. And she didn't really like the direction I was going in, because I told her I didn't want to practice that religion anymore. So we got into a big argument about it. And I left it alone for a while, and I came back 6 months later to talk to her about it again. And instead of having a full-blown conversation, I gave her Mr. Fuller's word guide, and I showed her the definition for God. I think it's God serving. And I told her, you know, I prefer to use the term God serving as opposed to God fearing. And I showed her why in the book, and, you know, she was really receptive to it. And I mean, so much so that, you know, she wanted me to get her a copy of the code book as well as the word guide. So I think it's all a matter of just presenting, you know, something that they're interested in or something that intrigues them. And, you know, hopefully that may work.
I think that's a key point you made about that it takes time. You know, it's not something that always is going to be all quick. You know, people got to take some time.
Indeed, and I also agree with the other caller. You definitely have to ask questions. Definitely. It's the key.
I think one thing on that time portion, I don't know what part of the world your dad is in. Like, do you mind telling us what state he's in?
Oh, he's in Canada.
Oh, he's in Canada? Yeah. Okay. It's been my experience, that patience thing that people are talking about, and I've even heard Mr. Fuller say this, where he has had people who have got mad at him and told him his book wasn't worth toilet paper and blah, 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 that, you know, if what he says is true, if this person is non-white, eventually they're going to have a problem with racism. He said, invariably, something would happen and they would come back and they would be very receptive, even excited to talk about racism. And I have seen that happen too. If what you say is true, system of white supremacy, something is going to happen eventually where he's going to be wanting to talk about racism, and he might even be receptive to hearing a different view on racism than what he has previously thought about it.
Exactly, and at that point, he'll know that if everybody else he knows has his attitude about talking about it, he'll know he can come talk to you about it. And that's always my philosophy about this, although, you know, it takes a lot of patience, is wait till people come to you with a problem about racism, and then obviously they're much more receptive.
Do you get emotional when you talk to white people about racism? Or do you talk to white people about racism? I think your line is not behaving correctly. We can't hear you. It's sounding kind of garbled like it was before. Still can't hear you. Okay. We'll look out for it. Somebody else dialed in. The person that called in from 5301, your line should be open. 5301?
Good evening. Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
One of the, is she calling back in? Because maybe I have to wait for her to call back in.
I think she's already with us. Are you with us, caller?
Yes, I am. Is that better?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, cool beans. Yeah, I do not talk to white people about racism. I try not to talk to white people at all if I can. Yeah, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
That's just interesting. Interesting note. I will say this, and I'll mute my line so that S. Dot can roll because he just joined us. But for me, that really, when I got serious about racism and getting better, because I think people talked about improving your ability to successfully talk about racism, one of the things that exponentially improved my ability, and I'm still learning, I'm not perfect, but was talking to white people, because I found that I was very ineffective speaking about racism when I got emotional talking to white people. So that, just that alone helped me get better. to speak about racism and not get emotional. And then that just easily transfers over to, or it should transfer over where, you have that same calm, poise, courteousness when you speak to a non-white person. But yeah, I have found talking to white people that really, you got to get serious about things if you're going to talk to white. And I think we know that on some level. I'll mute my line.
Good evening. Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
For me, and I haven't heard the whole conversation, so forgive me if I'm repeating something that someone said earlier to you. But for me, I use a reverse engineering strategy. More specifically, I use, I don't think that you should reinvent the wheel. You can look at the strategies that other individuals use that are successful in getting across their ideas and implementing their particular ideology. So for me, I have found that considering there are an estimated 2 billion Christians on the planet, I think that is evidence that they are very effective in getting across their platform. So rather than reinvent the wheel, I take a page from their missionary handbook and look at a lot of the strategies and the ways in which they are able to go out and gather other individuals and encourage them and convert them to Christianity in terms of codification. And that being that I know that some of the most skillful individuals that do missionary work, they're able to take the scriptures or the Bible and be able to put it in everyday plain speak and couch those narratives in such a way that they take the principles or a particular lesson and they're able to apply it to an everyday situation, so much so that you start listening to them and go, wow, that's a really profound thought. Where does that come from? And then you're questioning the source of it, and then it's like a trail of breadcrumbs, and then they will slowly introduce you to a scripture, but they won't beat you over the head with it, because as we know, those who stand on the corners or on subways or on buses who yell a lot of that material, they're not as effective. But the ones that are really effective are the ones who are able to take that material and frame it in a way that it's relevant to your everyday life situations. So particularly with the work of Mr. Fuller and a few other people, I've been able to take some information from much of their work, whether it be hearing things in interviews that I heard Mr. Fuller say a number of things that I thought were really profound, but I recognized it wouldn't go over as well if I was speaking to a teenager. So I had to change the language up in a way in which that it would be better conveyed to a teenager. So I think that considering you know your father and you have a relationship with him, I think that you will have an idea for the language in which he will be receptive to this information. So just study the material and put it in a way in which it's easier for him to digest, as opposed to just assuming that you can give him a bunch of information and he's going to digest it, because oftentimes people are very adverse to material that questions their paradigm of belief.
Okay.
I think that's a real good point about being flexible, because when you get good at it, talking with your dad, it may be different. You have to talk to another, a different person, a younger person, or somebody else, or whoever. So being able to adapt, to the individual victim, the individual non-white person is an important piece of codification, in my opinion.
definitely. Because I'm trying to talk to like my little brother and my little sister and stuff like that, and I'm trying to reach them, but you know, it's difficult how to maneuver and get to them because they have. I mean, I have so much stuff fighting against. I got to fight into TV, friends, my dad, so much stuff. So yeah, definitely, good point.
Don't fight the TV. Don't fight the TV. What I would say, I would be brief so that S. you can go, but that is one of the suggestions from how to win friends and influence people the best way to win fights is to not have them and to figure out ways where you are avoiding fights. And I would say with the TV and really everything that you just mentioned, you're not fighting it. That's, I think, one of the key concepts that Mr. Fuller talks about, that counter-racist jujitsu. I was just going to say, find out what they watch on television. Because I know if they're young, they watch something on television. There's some shows that they're watching that can be real easy to just thinking about what we're looking at. Because we're looking at racism, white supremacy all the time. And that can be an easy one where the conversation starts off where we are just talking about a television program, and then maybe 2 episodes a week, a month, or it could even be 15 minutes later. Now we're talking about racism, but we're still talking about that television program. I've seen that work a lot. I'll mute my line.
Yeah, I would add that if you're talking to a younger person, there's a rapper who's out, just released an album last week, C.O.W.S. The album is entitled Born Sinner. And on the album itself, there are a few hidden gems in terms of verses in which he does talk directly about racism and its impact on him, which was a refreshing thing for me to hear from this person. Now, a lot of the other language in the album is not going to be the most constructive, but as I said earlier, oftentimes, you have to get in where you fit in with younger people. So I think that maybe if you were listening, maybe if you went onto YouTube and heard the album and maybe engaged your younger siblings in some conversation about, hey, did you hear the new J.O.W.S? And they'll be like, what do you know about J.O.W.S? And then, maybe you could play the song, and then when it gets to that particular verse or whatever, feel like, oh, what he said right there was pretty interesting, and that might be a way of opening the conversation. I think that if you try to go at a younger person with a so-called conscious rapper, considering so much of the music right now is negative, that they're not going to be open to it. So I think that you have to begin with someone who's probably more popular and might have just a few bits of information that is constructive there. And then you can transition to other artists, maybe like a Lupe Fiasco or something else, another artist, once they're open to it. But just engage them where they are in terms of, their music, and don't approach their music from the perspective as most older people do and tell them how bad their music is and how much it sucks, because that's automatically going to stop the conversation.
I think Mos Def has some pretty interesting songs where racism is discussed.
Yeah, seen Baby.
Yeah, but he does.
Yeah, but you'll find them under Mos Def if you're looking for those older albums, the ones I'm talking about, like Black on Both Sides.
Yeah, but most younger people immediately are not going to listen to Mos Def. If they're like under 25 years old, it's going to go above their relevant factor right now.
Doesn't mean you can't put him in the car, invite him out for ice cream, and turn it on, and then ask him what they think about what he's saying. My grandfather did that to us incessantly. Not about racism, particularly with gospel music, but he really did use music a lot of times in our car rides with him to teach us, certain things that he wanted us to know. And he would we would fight over the back seat because whoever sat in the front was going to have to repeat the lyrics and interpret what they meant. But I think the car is a pretty good place to introduce it. Bribe him with some treats or something.
Yeah, they're far away though. They're in Canada, so that's not gonna work. They're far away.
Well, you could text them or email them links to a particular song and ask them what they thought about this song, what do they think of this song, and that might be a way.
Yeah, I can definitely give it a try. I know that they like slack songs, like what I mean, like party songs, dance songs, smoking dro, popping pills, all those those kind of songs. So
yeah, that's why I said J. Cole might appeal to them.
Yeah,
because he does have a few songs that are in that vein. So he's more than likely somebody who they would probably be familiar with. And I know that his album did fairly well last week. I think it may have even outsold Kanye West's album last week. So so he's doing fairly well. So, and there's the word fair.
2 times.
But yeah, exactly. But so I think he'll be relevant to them.
Okay.
I would also suggest sharing hidden colors. That's always helpful in regards to the
Oh yes. What I realized too. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say the video Gus made with Kanye West, that might be constructive. Kanye West, you could share that with them.
Yes.
Bless you.
I think children dig the movie They Live. Depending on what age they are, it's got some a little sex scene in there. But besides that, it's kids usually get the picture pretty clear on that one.
That's an old movie, right? That's the glasses and stuff.
Yep, that's the one.
Oh, okay.
Well, do you all think that in this current generation that's like bred on video games and, hip hop and music videos and things like that, do you think that they would be easily reachable by books past, let's say, the age of 12 if you were to make counter-racist books?
Yeah, I think so, just, depending on how it's presented, especially if it's a child that likes to look at books, or even if it's a child that necessarily doesn't like to look at, if they don't necessarily like to look at books, but just some with colors and, round shapes and stuff, children seem to be more attracted to that type of stuff, even if it's not something that's directly up there in their frame of reference, if it's, pleasing to the eye.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to gauge their appetite for sitting and reading because I was like a library hound during the summers when I was younger. But it may be comic book form. That probably would be more appealing.
I find that I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say Pam has been talking about doing something like that, having like a comic book. She was graphic arts. They have a different fancier term that they use as opposed to comic book.
Graphic novel?
Yes, graphic novel form that is talking about racism, white supremacy to try to get more younger people. In fact, I even think the Panthers had a comic book. The Black Panther Party during the 60s, they did. They had a comic book that was talking about racism, white supremacy. I'll dig and see if I can dig that up. But yeah, they were doing a lot. Alondra Nelson, I looked at that book today before we did the program, and we said that she said, and I thought this was a great point. It was a subtle one that she made at the end of the program, much like I'm doing today, that she suspects that white people purposely have programmed us to think of Panthers and get guns. That's how you deal with racism, and not Panthers medical program, Panthers breakfast program, Panthers comic books that deal with racism. Like, that's not what you think of at all. And that was like the stuff that really got a whole lot of people interested in what they, including white people, in what they were doing. The gun part is very important as well, no doubt, but they were doing so much. It was not just, in my view, it does a disservice to all of the stuff that they were doing to try to help black people to just limit them to just being about some black people with guns, because that's really the way that they talk about their legacy. These were just some crazy niggas with guns and ended up being killed and going to jail in the end. And they were doing that very thing, graphic novels talking about racism. We are at the 3-hour mark. Great dialogue. We can pick it up later. We should be back later in the week. I think Dave Myers should be here on Wednesday. That's the non-white male who was raised with a white family that lied to him and told him that he had a medical condition and that he was a white person. And he didn't find out the truth until, I mean, it's like
I just try to revitalize Uncle Ruckus.
He called the program. You can go back in the archives. He called the first time that Dr. Moore was on in 2009. He called and he talked about some of this, and then he called in again several times. I think he called in when John Delport was on, but he's called in before. And he's talked, he's done interviews, and I think even some video footage where they're talking about, you know, his tragic, I mean, I don't even know what word to, tragic, that's all I can say, really, his tragic experience. But he should be here. He lives in this area, Pacific Northwest. He knows Dr. Eddie Moore Jr., Cowbell. Yeah, I don't really know, I don't really know what else to say. He'll be here, I guess, Wednesday. Same time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Dave Myers, scratching my head even now.
Gus, can I make a really quick suggestion? If anyone is interested in doing comic books or even any little pamphlets, you know, one of the materials that I go back to look at when I want to get inspiration for that, they're Christians, but it's a popular publishing house called Chick Publications, and they make these little pocket-sized comic book tracks to spread their message, and then they have the full color ones. So you can go online and type them in, Chick Publications, but, you know, see what they do and kind of get an idea of how the Christians use propaganda to recruit and spread their message and to appeal to the emotions of people. So that might be, you know, a helpful reference for anyone that is considering doing that.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Chick, C-H-I-C-K.
Okay. C-H-I-C-K.
Right.
Groovy.
Publication.
We will be back on Wednesday, white people permitting. Thanks, everyone, for participating. And you can visit the author, our guest for today's program, Jonetta Rose Barras. You can visit her website. It is her name, JonettaRoseBarras.com. She has more information about the book we talked about today, Whatever Happened to Daddy's Little Girl, and her other works, Constructive Material. Thank you all for tuning in. I hope it was a constructive investment of your Monday evening. Be constructive. Don't spectate. Be constructive, and really make sure that you are minimizing your conflict with other non-white people. Make that contact as constructive as possible. Find out what people watch on television. That can be really easy. Really easy way to have dialogue with other victims of racism. Find out what racist programming that they're tuning into for hours upon hours each week. And then you'll get a better idea of the racist programming that's going through their brain computer regularly. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice as soon as possible. Context of White Supremacy. Signing out.
I'm a victim, brother.
You're a victim.
I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning.
Shut up.
The man has programmed my conditioning. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.